Barry and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company.
At least I have the radio to keep me company. On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
So, Jimmy, I need you and Eddie, as the youngers here, to offer me some assistance.
Happy to do so.
Okay, Grandpa.
Correct. I don't know.
By the way, I loved your cane coming in. That's nice. It's good style for
You
you.
like that?
I know it's reaching the second half century of your
Good
life
time,
where you have
brother.
to break that out, but it was stylish, I will admit.
Listen, I will admit to the fact that I'm 25 years older than you guys. I also hope when you are the age that I am now, you look as good as I do. I hope that for both of you. So here's my question. The NFL owners meeting, and there's a lot to talk about today. Basketball will be the main topic of conversation. But there are two storylines that I'm going to rely on the youth of the two of you to illuminate to me, because one of them I'm confused by, and the other I want you to tell me why I should care. Okay? The first is, Jimmy Cook, I will leave it to you. Please tell me the new rule changes in the National Football League.
So the two most notable rule changes would be the NFL approving modifications to its viewed by many outdated kickoff system, and the other rule change is a tackling technique kind of known as a swivel tackle or a hip drop tackle was banned by the NFL owners and the competition committee, yesterday or 2 days ago. I think those are the two notable. Eddie, am I missing any?
So what is the change to the kickoff?
We would have to do a whole show to properly explain what all has changed with the kickoff. If you'd like me to read a paragraph, I can. If you want me to just...
Here's my point, and I want to know if anybody else is along. I would like for people to let me know. Let me give you a little bit, the reason why I'm asking, of an opinion here, and then I want people to either tweet me or text me their thoughts on whether they agree or disagree. Because sometimes I like to barometer test myself, because I don't want to be an out-of-touch guy, right? I don't want to be the old guy that's out of touch. Like, for example, yesterday, the situation with P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Sean Combs. I'm not sure which name he goes by now, but I saw this story, and I'm like, can somebody fill me in on what's going on here? And apparently what's going on is there was a lawsuit for $30 million that he settled that included allegations of sexual misconduct by Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Sean Combs, and the federal investigators looked into that further and decided that it merited raiding two of his homes, and then he hopped on a plane and went to an island where he can't be extradited. That's my understanding at best on that.
I figured out how to easily explain the kickoff change.
Okay.
Do you want me to give that now?
Yes.
Right. The distances have changed between where one team and the other team are on the field before the ball is kicked off, and then only the kicker and the returners can move during the kickoff process until either the ball touches the ground or it is fielded by a returner. That is the basic way I can explain it without getting into all the nuances of yard changes, etc.
So here is where I raise my question.
Okay.
And I want people to tell me if I am simply old and outdated and passé, or if I'm consistent with the majority of football fans.
I thought you were young and hip.
I am that. I don't care about rule changes. I don't need constant explanation. I think the NFL is the master at keeping themselves in the 24-hour news cycle, and I think at times they come up with tweaks and amendments just to keep themselves in conversation, and works because with the Pacers getting a big win last night against the Los Angeles Clippers, with the NCAA tournament heading into the Sweet 16 and the number one seed in a region being Purdue, with a lot going on in the world of sports. You have an NBA point shaving or like gambling thing that is very dicey. You've got the Shohei Ohtani story, yet the NFL were leading and talking about it. And my thing is, I like the NFL. I like the Colts. I like the passion people have for the Colts in town. There's a lot I like about all of that. But
hashtag for the shoe. The
NFL, during its quest to constantly and consistently stay in the narrative and be a 12-month calendar, is going to eventually, and it probably isn't going to be in my lifetime, but it's going to eventually start to fatigue people with nuanced changes that many seem, from a fan standpoint, to probably find either irrelevant or excessive. And then it gets also overly complicated on what they're doing, and it is starting to overcomplicate what was very simple. And that very simple thing that made the NFL the 8,000-pound gorilla that it is they played on Sunday, they played a game on Monday, and you knew, and I understand it. It's a collision sport, not a contact sport. Guys are bigger, stronger, faster. I get all of that. I totally get it. And some of these are health issues or safety issues. I understand it. But I don't know that I need, like, long, drawn-out meetings and dissertations, even though I've just done so, about what all of it means. I want to be different, but I don't care.
Well, that's fair that you, the consumer and the media member, doesn't want it. And I think there's a lot of people, myself included, that are in your boat, Jake. I don't care to hear about it. I don't need to know about it. Just tell me when the games are going to be, and it'll all be fine. But there's no doubt, and it's been overwhelming the last 3 or 4 seasons, the kickoff in the NFL is largely a ceremonial thing. Returns are down. Returns for scores are certainly down. And that's not even talking about onside kicks and the success rate or lack thereof there, since player safety has been the forefront of the NFL the last decade. So the need to do it, I agree with. It's the whole having a big press release and the pomp and circumstance of it where I'm with you. I don't need any of that, but the idea of updating aspects of the sport that either have lost their luster or need a little bit more juice to them, like kickoffs, I'm not necessarily opposed to. I do think, though, and this has been the joke around special teams coaches, coordinators, the joke around fans, people that care about the sport, is that at some point, that whole ceremonial process of a kickoff is going to be, here's the ball at the 35 or the 25-yard line, and let's play. There's no point in having kickoffs be part of the game. That is the end line at some point for that specific area of the sport. We're just slowly kind of digging our feet, hoping that maybe they can find something to stave that execution. But at some point, that's where the sport's going to go.
You know, the reality is that there are leagues that have come along to try to compete with the NFL that were mocked for doing so, and the NFL picks the little things that were innovative of those leagues and puts them in as their own. That's the reality.
That's exactly what they did here. The XFL, that kickoff is an XFL-inspired idea.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, you can poo-poo the competitor all you want, but, you know, what is it they say? Like, what's the word?
Imitation is
the
ultimate
ultimate form of flattery.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Last night, Pacers, big win. Eddie Garrison actually slept for an hour and a half right there. I don't know if you know this or not. For those that don't know.
I went on a rager last night.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Eddie Garrison. Now, the only problem with going on a rager now in Indianapolis is that everything's closed at 11. But Eddie Garrison is not only the CEO of the company here, but he also runs the board for us, produces this show, and then does the same for the Pacers broadcast, which last night signed off the air at 3:45 in the morning. And then Eddie actually, and that Corbin fellow, he was here overnight too, right?
Yeah.
And the two of you guys went to Lincoln, the Pancake House, and got waffles, and then came back, and then you took an hour nap, right?
Yeah, that was the rager going to IHOP.
That's right. So, Eddie, that was a pretty good performance last night for the Blue and Gold, right?
Yeah, I mean, Jarris Walker finally getting some minutes, his first meaningful minutes since the last Segababa where the Pacers.
See what happens? See what happens? You toss the ball, and then Segababa gets brought up. See? That's what happens. By the way, Eddie was actually at Club Applebee's yesterday. He just didn't want to tell you that.
And then he went to the Taco Bell cantina.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm going. There are very few times where I try to wield any sort of veteran authority on this program, but
going to hit you with his cane.
That is the last time that we used the term Segababa, which means second game of a back-to-back. Notably because A, that whole term is lame, and B,
there are no more.
They played in the same arena they played in the night before, so it's a little different.
It's still the second night of a back-to-back. You have to play back-to-back nights. I understand the travel's not there, but nonetheless. Jarris Walker played in his most minutes of his rookie season. I think he was like 29. He was in large part why the Pacers, I think, won that game. Just him coming off the bench there to start that second quarter, got the offense rolling, him and Pascal Siakam. And then you saw, I think, a little bit of a trend away from Doug McDermott last night. He started the game off the bench, played 9 minutes, did not come back into the game. Jarris Walker got the start in the second half. And then Pascal Siakam just took over in that fourth quarter, 11 points, and really put the Clippers away there in the final stages of that game.
So Walker did have 7 assists. He had 8 points. Siakam continues to be tremendous. 31 points last night. Halliburton, again, it's weird to say, 21, and you say, oh, he was off. He was 6 of 9 from three-point range.
That's the key one for me, seeing that number continue to get back to a nice percentage.
The best way that I can say Halliburton, though, and this is nitpicking admittedly, but there were times earlier this year where Halliburton looked like he was playing. Do you remember, and it's an old school toy, I don't know, you'd get them like at a carnival, but there used to be a toy that was a wooden paddle that had a rubber ball that was on a string that was attached to it, and you would just try to hit it back and forth. Halliburton looked like he was playing with that kind of – the basketball was like that to him. He had an ability when he was playing. It was like he was in constant control of like extending the ball all the way out and then snapping it right back when the defense didn't know what he was going to do with it. You didn't know whether he was going to pass or pull up for a three or whatever it was. But and every time he hit it back again on the paddle on perfect mark, whether it was an assist that you least expected it or a pull-up three or whatever else, everything that he was doing in November and December, the ball was going exactly where he had intended it to go. And it feels like that has slowed down for him a little bit, and in particularly in the facilitation department, that he is not, and maybe part of that was what we talked about ad nauseum with Buddy Hield being on the floor. But it feels like the ball is not springing and bouncing around like it was previously before. Still had 9 assists, don't get me wrong. But I don't know. Jimmy, to me, to the eye test, it seems like there are still moments where the game, he is not able to move at that half tick faster than everybody else.
I think he's still trying to put everything back the way it was, whether it's the Buddy Hield trade you want to point to, whether it's when he got hurt. You're right about the assist numbers. From just a standpoint, he was otherworldly MVP-like conversation early in terms of, maybe that wasn't happening nationally, but you look at his stats, you're like, wow, that could be an MVP-like season. 12 assists per game in November, 11 assists per game in December, 14 in January, 11 and a half in February. Like, he was all over the map in terms of his assists per game throughout that stretch before he gets hurt, then before the All-Star break, and before Buddy Hield gets traded. Conversely, or I guess in addition to that, rather, his three-point numbers were off the charts. His scoring numbers were off the charts throughout that stretch. And so now he's kind of, with the addition of Pascal Siakam, figuring out what this offense is in a post-Buddy Hield world. He's slowly putting everything back together. We're seeing the three-point numbers finally the last 3 games beat an uptick. And I think the assists will eventually follow back into place. Do I think he's going to get back to the point where he's averaging 15 a game? I don't know, Jake, because I think you and I are in agreement on that. The level of having a shooter that you can always rely on to space the floor definitely helps not only the offense, but those assist numbers. So maybe he never gets back to that level, but the idea of him still being able to average a double-double a game while shooting 50% or better from beyond the arc, not only do I think is a very likely scenario, I think it's going to happen as they turn the corner in these final 12 games. How
familiar are you with the name Jonte Porter?
Prior to 72 hours ago? Not very.
Can you tell me where Jonte Porter played collegiately?
No, but I can't do that with a lot of players. I know he is the brother of Michael Porter.
Jonte Porter's from Columbia, Missouri. He did play at Missouri. He went undrafted. He's in the NBA. Why are we talking about Jonte Porter, you ask? Very good question. On January 26th, the Toronto Raptors, with Jonte Porter on their roster, had a game against the Los Angeles Clippers. There was a parlay bet, or whatever you want to call it, a prop bet, I guess is the term. A prop bet in that game that you could bet on as to the number of three-point shots that Jonte Porter would make in that game. I think it was 1.5. All of a sudden, in Vegas and on the sportsbook apps, there's a flag that comes through essentially, which is, wait a minute, Jonte Porter, who probably, what percent of NBA fans not following the Toronto Raptors can name Jonte Porter?
I'll say 0% because he's a two-way player.
Okay, so he's not even a full-time NBA guy, right?
Correct.
So Jonte Porter is part of a prop bet of number of three-point shots that he'll hit in a game. And on January 26th against the Clippers, a huge amount of money is wagered that Jonte Porter will hit fewer than, I think it was 1.5 three-point shots. He plays 4 minutes. He was pulled from the game for, I believe it was, initially there was one where he was pulled because of like a vision issue and one where he had like a muscle strain. That was, that night, the highest payout for a prop bet in the association. More people wagered on Jonte Porter. More money, I should say, was wagered on Jonte Porter and the number of three-point attempts he would have than any other prop bet in the association. And immediately you say to yourself, that sounds weird. That sounds fishy. That seems to set off some alarm bells. Until, and you say, that's seemingly a total anomaly. That is so weird that that would happen. Until just a few nights later. A few nights later, after like everything comes out, there's yet another game. Actually, I take that back, like a month later, against the Sacramento Kings. He plays 3 minutes. 3 minutes, attempts one shot, and leaves the game after 3 minutes due to an illness. But Porter's prop bets were the number one moneymaker from that night in the NBA when people bet the under on the number of points that he would score.
Oh.
It's not funny, though.
I mean, it's wild.
But it also is, I guarantee you.
Here's why it's funny. It's funny because it's so, like, tip of the cap to the sports books because parameters are in place to monitor this kind of thing. And they've caught it, and they launched an investigation, and it is what it is. But it's the most obvious, like, you're not going to end up getting away with this scot-free. What's funny about it is the idiocracy, whether he was involved with people that were placing the bets or not, the way it's gone about, an eye issue, I gotta come out of the game. I can't help it because I aggravated it 3 days earlier, and then there's a pattern of you missing games. That's the funny part about it.
Here's the non-funny part
It's a dumb
about it.
crime.
If that's happening with an NBA player who has $450,000 a year potentially at stake, in the world that we live in today in college basketball with NIL, when you watch the Sweet 16 and you're watching players, those players are making significant amount of money for their name, image, likeness, as they should. As they should. A player for Duke, a player for Clemson, a player for Gonzaga that is helping their team bring in millions of dollars through in their conference, through NCAA tournament television money, the further that they go. Those players are absolutely entitled to that money. No problem whatsoever. Free capitalistic, God bless America. But not every player in college basketball gets NIL money. But every player in college basketball plays for a program that is within a conference that is the moneymaker for their school. So what about the Jonte Porter of San Jose State? What about the Jonte Porter of Texas Pan American? What about those players that are seeing their contemporaries get paid $10,000, $20,000, $100,000, $750,000 in NIL money, and they're not getting anything, but they see that their school is monetizing their efforts just as much, relatively speaking, as other programs. And so therefore they feel that there is an entitlement towards money, as there probably is, that they are not getting. And yet they have two guys sitting next to them in chemistry class on an app, and they've got a guy that's a professor of their class that does a little book on the side and whatever else. And they say to themselves, who in the world is going to notice?
Well, people will notice because they did here. That's the moral for the
Let me
students at
finish.
Texas El Paso.
Let me finish. Who in the world, in the mind of a 19-year-old, who in the world is going to notice if we at San Jose State are favored by 11 and we're playing New Mexico State and we only win by 9? And I'm a backup small forward, and I know that I'm one of the guys that's going to be on the floor during late fouls at the end of the game. Sports in general, the one thing that fans want, and the one thing that fans who wager on sports want, and the one thing that sports properties who want fans to wager on sports because it increases the eyeballs and the attention towards games, the one thing that all of them want is integrity of the game throughout. And what the Jonte Porter situation is doing is shedding light on the fact that, yes, you can sniff it out if you'd like, but it's kind of like people that are on the interstate doing 75 miles an hour. The guy you see pulled over, that the cop has pulled over because he was doing 82, but he was changing lanes with no signal on and it was blaring music and he was calling attention to it, that guy represents the other 98% of drivers that are speeding but not getting caught. I'm not saying 98% of players are doing this, but what I'm saying is you would have to assume that if at the NBA level something like that is suddenly unturned, that it's going on within, in particular, the college ranks, and it just feels like a very, very tangled web that's being weaved.
I don't disagree with you on that, but Jonte Porter is going to be made an example of. If it's all proven, he's done. He'll be banned for life, and that will be the reaction to it of players at smaller schools or anywhere else that are thinking about doing this. It's like, okay, if you want to try to run the risk, by all means, go ahead. But if you get caught, no one's going to feel sorry for you.
But, Jimmy, I don't disagree with that. But what I'm saying is this. I think that you are forgetting, and I say this almost in defense of young people. I'm not saying it's to condemn them. But when you're 20, you're invincible. You're invincible. Those things don't apply to you. When you're 20 years old, you don't have necessarily the vision to know and to see and the foresight to know that things like that can bring you down. And especially if you are 20 years old and you are going about a craft that you feel puts you in a pocket that is overlooked. If they haven't noticed me to give me NIL money, how in the world are they going to notice me if I'm missing a free throw in a critical moment of a game to make sure that the point spread is 9 and not 10, et cetera, et cetera? I just think it's a slippery slope. And I get it. I mean, I'm not against or opposed to the gambling apps and that kind of thing. I mean, I think it allows people to enjoy sports. I just think that, and I think that it should be catered towards those that responsibly do so. And there is a personal responsibility that comes into it. But to me, my prediction is this Jonte Porter situation is going to be one of what is going. I mean.
But what would you? I'm not trying to put you in a spot, Jake, like to go against your argument, and maybe we save this for a later segment. But what is the solution? Because I'm with you. It does paint the picture of the slippery slope. How do you make it not slippery? How do you make it a straight, narrow path?
You don't. That's my point. My point is, the toothpaste is out of the tube.
Correct. Pandora's box is open. It's over.
Correct. I mean, what I'm getting at though is that I just think. You know, this is a story that, I mean, this is like the third major sports gambling story that's come out in the last week.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, like, buckle in. That's all. Buckle in.
I'm with you on that. I don't think it's going to be over, but there's no putting it back together. You're going to have to live with the consequence of gambling being league-wide or sports worldwide, and how that ends is people getting caught, stuff being tarnished, and punishments being having to lay down, because you have to protect the integrity in any way you can still of the league. Because without the integrity, to your earlier point, sports will falter. Sports will die.
Coming up in just a couple of minutes, a guy that we talked about yesterday. He is the new head basketball coach at IU Indy. That's IUPUI is the way it stands right now, going from the University of Indianapolis. Paul Casaro joins us next. Big show today. Carson Cunningham. That's Dr. Carson Cunningham, by the way. Since he played at Purdue and led them to an Elite Eight, he also has written 5 books, gotten a doctorate. Coaches at West Point. He's going to join us at 1 o'clock, talk a little college round ball and Boilers. Kevin Harlan, who was on the mic for Purdue's run through Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Going to join us at 1:30, and then Stephen Holder, 2 o'clock. Loaded one on a Tuesday. It's Query and Company on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Jefferson Shreve stepped up to fight.
are a product of the University of Indianapolis, correct?
Si, senor.
Now, you claimed that you are a bit fatigued today because you were in late overnight running the Pacer board and then had a quick turnaround to come in today. But I think actually what's keeping you maybe a little bit fatigued is the carryover from the late-night candlelight vigils you were holding outside Nickerson Fieldhouse to make sure the coach didn't leave, right?
Nickerson Hall, first of all.
Nickerson Hall, sorry.
May or may not be true. I don't know.
But you're happy for him, right?
Yes, that is, in fact, true. Corbin, I think, may have been there with me. I don't know. We cannot confirm nor deny.
Jimmy,
take half
you,
of the
as a Ron
workforce.
Colley guy, very happy for him, correct?
I'm thrilled. I'm very thrilled for him. By the way, you could take half of the workforce in this building and they would be a part of that candlelight vigil, but that's neither here nor there.
That is true. That is absolutely true. But we are thrilled that IU Indianapolis, IUPUI as it's known now, they found their new head basketball coach. We talked to the athletic director that made the hire yesterday. Now we talk to the man that will assume the role as the head of the Jaguar basketball program. Paul Casaro, coach, joins us on the show. Coach, how are you?
I'm great, guys. Just really, really excited to get this thing going.
What's the first thing that you made sure to bring to the office to make yourself feel at home?
Oh, I've had a UND backpack for the last 4 years, and I didn't think it'd be good to wear. You have the Flying Eye logo now that I'm a Jag. So I had to bring a briefcase, and that was a different look for me. But that's kind of the first thing.
People are like, look, they hired an accountant here to run the basketball
So
program.
it's kind of one of those sleek ones, that has the strap. It's kind of a backpack / briefcase, whatever you call them. But I think it looks good.
So what we're getting at here is that we need to make sure, first and foremost, that we hook you up with some new Jaguar paraphernalia, right?
Yeah, and then actually Luke, the AD, very first thing he came with a bunch of stuff in my size. So I'm swagged out now. I should be good to go.
All right, fair enough. So let's begin with this. This transition, the immediate thing is that people are going to look at it and say, okay, they obviously want to root IU Indy, and I'm going to call it that because I know it's IUPUI, but it's going to soon be Indiana University, Indianapolis. So IU Indy is what I'm going to call it, not to confuse you with the old job. But I think that, Luke, it was very important for him, he told us, to root in local players and just kind of entrench here within the community. How do you do it when you are going from a different level that you're playing from Division II into the Division I level?
I mean, I think you can honestly look at, okay, well, we're going to recruit a little bit different here and there, but in terms of, who we're going after. But how I built the program at University of Indianapolis is how I intend to build it here. The city hasn't changed. What's going to be our fan base hasn't changed. I've talked to you guys several times over the year. The local media hasn't changed. I know how to go about this in this city, and I'm really excited because Cardi already laid the blueprint for how I'm going to tactfully go about that. And if people who followed us, we had Division I caliber players on our roster. So, we're going to go after, some of the same, but then we're also going to go up a level too and try to get guys that maybe have been a level higher in the past to stay here and build something special in our hometown. So a few similarities, but a lot of commonalities. And that was kind of what we talked about in the interview process, is there's so many parallels to what we were able to accomplish and build 15 minutes up the road that I'm quite confident that we can do that here, because I also do have 2 years of Division I experience at Purdue-Fort Wayne, who's in this conference. So adding that experience to my experience at University of Indianapolis, I think it's just a perfect fit, and I'm excited to work alongside Luke and do this together.
The new head coach of IU Indy, the Jaguars, Paul Casaro, is our guest. Paul, let's go back to 2012 when you graduated from UIndy, and I know you finished your MBA there as well in 2014, but that's 12 years or a decade, depending on which path you want to go from, time that it took for you to get to this point, which is to be a Division I head coach and to be doing it in your hometown of Indianapolis. If you would go back and talk to your past self when you finished at UIndy and you made the decision to pursue a path of coaching, how did that checkbox list or that objective list go to take you to this point where you're now a head coach at a D1 program?
Well, I've always been a, be where your feet are, a feet is guy, and dominate the job you have. Don't look too far ahead. Be in the present moment. All those coaching cliches, but it's how I live my life. When you get a job, you work as hard as you can at that and give your very best. And if you do that, you can hold your head up high. You'll keep that job, and then potentially other opportunities might present themselves. So when I was at UIndy as an assistant, we had a lot of success there, and I was never saying like, oh, I can't wait to the next step. Fortunately, the opportunity at Purdue Fort Wayne presented itself, and went up there, and that was really good, and I was all in there. And then I didn't know Stan Gerard was going to leave and go to Southern Indiana, and when he did, okay, there's an opportunity to come back to my alma mater, which to be my first head coaching job at my alma mater, that was incredible, something I didn't know that would come so soon at the age of 31. And what we did over the last 4 years, it was a daily grind of, just trying to attack each day and be the best we could be. And we had so much success, and it was awesome. And I didn't have a crystal ball and know a Division I program in my hometown 15 minutes for the road was going to present itself, and it did. And now I'm here. And all I'm focused on right now is, building IU Indianapolis up and making the city proud.
Was it hard to leave UIndy?
It was hard from the relationships that I had formed. 14 years of my life I spent there. Student athlete, assistant coach, head coach. So 14 years of my life, and then you talk about the majority of my adult life has been spent at that place. So when you get close to people, that's hard. But it wasn't hard from the standpoint of this opportunity, because this opportunity is just oozing with potential, and I'm really, really excited for this. It was going to take an opportunity like this to make me leave, and this opportunity is just so tremendous. That's what I'm excited about.
When's the last time you felt, and maybe it was this year when you realized, that you're a parent? I mean, that's obviously pretty life-altering or life-changing in a good way, but when's the last time you felt this kind of a challenge or were invigorated by challenging yourself to this level?
I think every time you take a new opportunity, I took the head coaching job at University of Annapolis when it was in COVID. I couldn't even go to my office for 4 months. We had 17 points returning from 82 the previous year. I had to fill a whole staff of players and coaches over a computer screen over Zoom. So, that was a challenge. Never having been at the Division I level, that was a challenge. And when I went to Purdue Fort Wayne, it was appointed recruiting coordinator right away. It's like, wow, Coach Golphin's trusted me to be recruiting coordinator, and I've never been at Division I level. That was a challenge, So there's been several challenges over the way. Jake, I'm a cancer survivor. At age 15, I was told I had cancer. Like, I've been used to walking into what seemed like tall tasks my entire life, and I embrace that. That's what life's all about, is getting adverse situations, challenging situations, and making the most of them. And I am thrilled to death and excited for what we are going to do here.
New IU Indy Jaguars head basketball coach Paul Gassaro is our guest. Paul, with all of the chaos is probably too strong a word, but with all of the aspects of your job, especially surrounding NIL, the transfer portal, so many different names within the portal itself as things continue to be fluid and open up, as teams that's knocked out of the tournament, and as this landscape itself kind of clears out, where do you allot your time or budget your time these first couple weeks on the job trying to lay a solid foundation for next season?
The staffing and filling out your roster, the two things you got to do first. You got to fill out the schedule. At the end of the day, fundamentally, you have to take care of your roster, build your staff, build your schedule, and then we'll branch out from there. And that's kind of what I've been attacking since I walked in the office this morning. How
different is the aspect of the transfer portal at this level, or do you expect it to be at this level than at the D2 level?
There are nuances here or there, but like I said, the transfer portal existed when I was up at Purdue Fort Wayne. So, I think sometimes people make a bigger deal of it than it really is. It's just part of the business.
How much? So take me through. Paul Gassaro is our guest, the new head basketball coach at IU Indy, IUPUI as we know it now. What is like the next week or two roadmap look for you in terms of not only acclimated, like in Normandale, right, in Hoosiers, like, well, let me get to know you guys, and you'll get to know me. What is the process?
Yeah, I have guys coming in for individual meetings here shortly after, we get off this call. Like I said, it's all about relationships. College athletics is the ultimate relationship business. So it is just that, getting to know the people that are here, your student athletes, your coworkers, and just getting integrated, and becoming part of IU Indianapolis and becoming a Jaguar. Like I said, I'm excited to work with everybody here. I'm excited to get ingrained into the campus. So that's what it is. You just got to immerse yourself, dive head in, and get to know everybody.
One of the things I ask coaches a lot, and I guess this would be fitting to ask you because you're starting a program here, right? I mean, you're taking over a new program. Do you have a particular style of play that you go out and say, I'm recruiting kids to this style? Or do you more so go out right now to see what players are interested to come into IUPUI and then maybe tweaking style based on who you're able to bring in?
It's my job to tweak style in terms of the exact X's and O's, what we do on either side of the ball. But there are a few things we look for. First off, if we're going to bring in a student athlete or even a staff member, if you're going to be a part of our program, there are 4 characteristics everybody in our program is going to have from a personal standpoint. They're going to be tough, they're going to be talented, they're going to be driven, they're going to be humble. Now, once they're here and you talk about our team, when I talk about style, the style of play, that's literally, okay, what kind of offense you're running, how you guarding this ball screen, what's your press look like, what's your half-court coverage look like, how do you rotate, that's style. But our identity, I'll tell you, will never change. So style will change based off personnel, but our identity is always going to be this, Jake, you come watch us play for the first time, I want you to walk away from a Paul Casaro coach team and say, man, that team is tough, they're disciplined, and they're up-tempo. All right? Tough teams, to me, they rebound, they win the 50-50 place. All right? Disciplined teams execute special situations, they know personnel, they don't turn the ball over. And then up-tempo, you just wear teams down over 40 minutes.
Paul, you and I have known each other a long time, and so I speak with a little bit of bias, obviously, but everywhere that you've gone, whether it was inspiring young Royals during your basketball career at Roncalli, whether it was doing the same at UIndy, we've always known you to succeed at whatever challenge that you tackle or whatever you put your mind to. And I have no doubt you're going to do that here. But from our conversations with Luke Basso, your athletic director, yesterday, it is clear that they want a winner, and they want a winner in their basketball program done quickly, but done the right way. You, in fact, had a similar sentiment in your comments in the press release yesterday, saying that very thing. You want to win quickly, but you want to do it the ethical and the right way. What was your selling point, and what is your messaging as a coach moving forward for how to do all of that, for how to win quickly, but to be able to do it the right and ethical way?
Well, I mean, it's just that. I can't give you all my secrets.
Sure, no, I don't want all the secret sauce.
But that's exactly what we're going to do, and that was my selling point. Just that, like, hey, I have a track record of doing it. It's not like I'm saying, I've never been a head coach, and I'm saying I'm going to do this. I've done it. We're going to do it, and we're going to make the city of Indianapolis proud. We will win. We will win quickly, the right ethical way. And bottom line is this: basketball fans in our city are going to be proud of Jaguar basketball. We're going to get this monster built, and people want to get behind it.
And with that, you're going to be playing a lot more games in the jungle, right, on campus. We talked to Luke about that. And then, hopefully, like an arena that people can also be able to come out and watch. So it does feel like you have the opportunity to be kind of along for a ride here, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's starting. Like I said, I'm excited to work alongside an athletic director with a vision that's equally is invested and loves this city. Our new chancellor, Chancellor Ramchad, she's very supportive of men's basketball and wants us to have success. President Witten at IU, all the stars are aligned, and we have support. And there's going to be no one that works at this harder than me, and it's going to start up top with me and our program and trickle down from there. So we're going to work hard to get the community engaged, to take notice, and like I said, jump on board now.
Okay, so I've been to games to watch the Jags play. I also took classes there, so Luke was saying he's going to hit me up for some donations. I'm cool with that. Here's the thing, though. I'm looking at it, right, Coach? Tough. I think I've got that covered, right? The tough aspect.
Oh, yeah. You are tough.
Okay, driven. I'm fairly driven. I'm cool with that. Humble. I have always said, when you consider all the totality of my greatness, the fact I don't talk about it enough makes me humble, right? Now, talented is where I'm screwed. Okay, so will you take 3 out of 4?
No, I'll tell you this, man. Jake, let me apologize for the analogy, but, my wife's really tough. My wife is driven. She's very humble, but she can't take a lick of basketball, and I want to sign her. So I'm sorry, I can't sign you.
All right, fair enough. Hey, head down to the bookstore, get yourself a backpack, although the briefcase is a good look. And certainly, the biggest thing is this. Congratulations. It's been in the last 4 or 5 months, you have had a lot of gifts that have come before you, and obviously been through, as you mentioned, at the age of 15, just persevering enough to be able to have those gifts come your way. So you are certainly well deserved of that comes before you. We look forward to watching the rise of Jaguar basketball.
Hey, thank you, guys. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks, Paul. That is Paul Casaro, the new head basketball coach at, as we know, at IUPUI, but IU Indy. And, yeah, I think he's going to do well. I'm very happy for him. I know I speak for a lot of the south side of Indianapolis that grew up watching Paul play and have seen this journey for him. For him to be a D1 coach and to do it in his city is an amazing accomplishment, and I have no doubt that there are even brighter days ahead for him.
And for those that have asked, IUPUI is, in fact, splitting into 2 different schools, Indiana University, Indianapolis, and then Purdue University, Indianapolis. The athletic side of it, all programs will be shifting to the IU Indianapolis side of it. So if you are going to school for either of those 2 programs, they are now separate. And if you are enlisted in a Purdue program, then ultimately now when someone is going there for athletic purposes, they will be through the IU Indianapolis umbrella, academically speaking.
I have a conspiracy theory here. I think he took the job, well, mainly because he's qualified for it and he wants it. But I also think he wanted to get out of diaper duty. Remember the last time we had him on the program, he said that he was going to be on diaper duty, doing all the late night calls.
That's right. Now all of a sudden he's like, hey, I got, you know what I mean?
Yeah. He's got to go out and recruit a whole new roster, got to get a coaching staff.
Plus it's hard to get I don't know, he needs a backpack and a diaper bag, right?
Yeah.
You can only carry one of them, so he's setting the diaper bag down, right?
Got to make sure you grab the right one on the way into work.
Carson Cunningham, by the way, speaking of driven, he is that. Speaking of talented, he definitely was that, especially at Oregon State and Purdue. He is, I would assume, humble, but he's also very accomplished in the fact that he has written 5 books. He's a doctor, and he's a coach. But he led Purdue to a Sweet 16 and an Elite 8. He's going to join us top of the hour.
Experience college basketball's beginning.
Just top of the hour. Time for another one of my story sessions, I guess. But when I was a much younger person and I was an aspiring sportscaster in Indianapolis, when I was in the 6th grade, I mean, I've told this story many a times, but I called Ed Sorensen randomly. He was my favorite sportscaster at Channel 6. I called him on the telephone. He answered, and eventually he invited me down to shadow him at Channel 6, which I did, and then just kind of never went away and was always down there hanging around. I think most people down there thought I was an intern. I wasn't. I was just a permanent job shadow. And there were so many people that were really, really, really nice and helpful to me. And then ultimately I ended up getting a job there as a behind-the-scenes guy. And one day when I was I think I was 26 years old, Ed one day just said to me, he said, "Why are you still here?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what you mean by that." And he said, "Well, you keep saying that you want to be a sportscaster, but why have you not sent tapes out? Why have you not done anything?" And I said, "Well, that's a good question." And he said, "Well, the time's now to start getting that going. So come with me." So we got in his car and we drove to the 21st Amendment on Meridian Street and went in, and he said, "Go in there and buy 2 cases of Strohs." And I thought, this is the most unconventional job path of all time. But okay, so I bought 2 cases of Strohs. And we got in Ed's car, and we went back to the tape room at Channel 6, which is the room where, satellite links were going in and out, and we were, and the news was taped, and all of the different highlights that you would see were recorded. And there was a guy named Paul Castanoli who worked in the tape room. And Paul was kind of a grizzly vet, but a teddy bear type with a heart of gold. And Ed said, "Paulie, we're going to get Jake a job in television, and here's what we're going to do." And Paulie said, "Okay, what's up?" And Ed said, "We're going to go into the set right now, and Jake's going to record my sportscast that I'm doing at 11 o'clock tonight, and you're going to record it, and then you're going to make 200 copies of it on VHS tape to give to Jake to send to TV stations all over the country, and you're going to do all of it for 2 cases of Strohs." And Castanoli looked right at me and said, "Let's do it, kid. Let's go." So I did. And 3 days later, I came into the sports office, and sitting on the desk was a box with 200 VHS tapes, all with my reel on them, as we called it, and I sent them to basically every TV station in America. And eventually got a job and left Indianapolis. I returned back to Channel 6, and when I did, I would spend a lot of time in the late-night hours going over different nuances and tapes and things like that with Paulie in the tape room. And Paul Castanoli would sit in the tape room and always had in the background film or different variations of film of Indianapolis 500 video that Channel 6 had shot. Every single piece of film, 3/4-inch, beta tape, every aspect of the evolution of camera and the recording of things being captured on video in the history of WRTV from 1948, I think it was, the first year of the Indianapolis 500, until the 2000s. Paul Castanoli took it upon himself every single day at work and to stay late every single night to digitize and archive every single frame of film that took place at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway that was captured by any photographer lifetime of WRTV. And as a result of his efforts, and there was a fire where some of that film was lost in the 70s, but as the result of Paul Castanoli's 100% passionate, heartfelt effort in doing all of that because of his love for the Speedway, eventually all of that film was handed over to IMS Productions as part of the archive of the Indianapolis 500 and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. All because Paul took it upon himself to do all of it and make sure that everything from Graham Hill to Graham Rahal, everything from, every driver that passed through there that was interviewed, from Carnegie all the way up to, Dave First's work, all of it was archived and digitized permanently and handed over to IMS. Paul passed away on Saturday. He had a tremendous love for the Speedway. He had a legacy that is left behind by his ability to keep the Speedway and all of that history alive in modern and now non-deteriorating form. And I will forever be grateful for Paul's kindness, his generosity, and his dedication to helping a young, aspiring broadcaster that had to be an annoying shadow at all times around him, and doing so willingly with a smile on his face. And I'm not saying that I'm that guy around here, but if you are in a workplace or in a situation where a young person has something that might progress their career, don't ever, for a split second, sleep on the fact that even the smallest gesture of kindness may help them immeasurably 30 years later. He will be missed for a very long time, and his contribution to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is as great as anybody that enters inside the greatest facility in the world. Carson Cunningham joins us next.
Basketball wasn't born in Indiana, but it sure.
Carson Cunningham began his college basketball career in what I think is actually one of the cooler or more underrated college campuses in America, and that is Oregon State in Corvallis, Oregon, before coming back home to his home state and playing for Purdue, where he was part of some really, really good Purdue teams, including one that knocked right on the door of the Final Four. He has written 5 books. He has his doctorate in history, and he is currently helping out the men's basketball program at West Point, the Army Academy, and he joins us on the program. Carson, how are you?
I feel strong to very strong. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to begin with this. You've written 5 books, The subject matter, I would assume they're all on history. The area of your expertise in your PhD in history is what aspect of history?
Kind of modern American history. I've written a bit of a range of books. I brought Huckleberry Finn back to life. I don't know if you know this, but he got fell in an iceberg and kind of got in a deep freeze for about 140 years. But anyway, I wrote that. We have 6 kids, my wife Christy and I, and my boys. It's hard to get these boys to read. So I wrote that one because I figured, what the hell? I mean, Huck Finn, he joins a local football team, and he's running around, and maybe they'll read that. And they actually liked it, so that was fun. But I got a wide range of books, but most of them are history books.
Now,
that's true. And I did modern American history. I studied under Randy Roberts. I'll get this plug in, a legend, an institution at Purdue, one of the great authors and storytellers for Purdue higher education history ever. And he's on ESPN a lot. He's on, Turner Classic Movies. He's just an incredible guy. But fortunately, he was my mentor.
Now, when you talk about Huck Finn, by the way, and then we'll get to basketball, because I forget from my, back when I read both of those books, obviously from Mark Twain, were Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, were they buddies or rivals, or did they not know each other?
Oh yeah, no, they were buddies. They ran around. Huck was a little bit more street smart, a little bit more practical. So Tom had all these kind of wild, imaginative shenanigans going on, and Huck was always like, "I'll go along, but I think it's a little wacky." But they were buddies. So
okay.
yeah, no, it was great stuff.
Hey, listen, let's begin with this. You obviously, I know that you are involved in coaching still in basketball today, but your alma mater, Purdue, is right there in the Sweet 16. You were right on the cusp of a Final Four. So let's start to go with the modern history thing. We'll go modern first and then go back in history. How much do you follow? How aware are you in the ins and outs of your alma mater right now?
Oh, I follow them very closely. I have had the good fortune of knowing the fellas on the staff for many, many years. I mean, I looked up to Brandon Brantley when I was playing CYO hoops, and he was starring at Andrean High School, battling against my brother, who was not at that level, but a really good high school player. And then obviously his big rivalry was Glenn Robinson at Roosevelt. So I've known him for decades, and Coach Painter now for over 20 years. And so I keep track with those guys. We see each other on the trail. We connect during the season. It's a really tight-knit group of Boilermaker hoopers, new and old. So I follow them closely, love watching them, and I really feel a sense of gratitude for just being connected to the program, because it's pretty startling what the consistency and the continuity over the years, and that's really what motivated me to write about it.
Carson Cunningham is our guest. Carson, I know that their story is not finished being completed, because if they were to ascend the mountaintop, then maybe this conversation is a moot point. But when you look at this version of the Purdue Boilermakers, where do you stack them up against the other great Purdue teams?
Well, obviously they're right there. I mean, they're among the greatest. I think Glenn Robinson's, I think it was 94 year, was really an incredible team. But this may be the best. I mean, it's hard to say right now, but it sure looks like it's in the mix. That's definite. And the separator, that, from what I can tell, is that they are really mission bound right now. I mean, you could see that when Edie walked off the bus. Like, it's a mindset of, like, we have business to do. It's a little bit angry in a good way. Like, you know what? Yeah, we shouldn't have lost last year. Like, we're on a mission. And I really thought that vibe came through this past 2 games. And it was like, my God, this is awesome. So I hope that continues. I know that's the attitude they're going to have. Just these teams are really good. I mean, 3 of the top 11 KenPom teams are are in their side of the bracket. And then you also have Purdue. So 4 of the top 11 are on Purdue's side, and only one of them is going to get to go to the Final Four. So it's not easy, but they're in a great mindset, and I think that could be a big separator. Not that other teams weren't, but I think when having lost to a 16 and then returning your National Player of the Year and having that kind of, hey, this is like a comeback tour mindset is maybe can drive them all the way. We'll see.
Carson, obviously it has been, and it's well documented, 44 years since Purdue was in a Final Four. You came really close, nearly halfway between then and now in that 2000 group. I'm curious, as a player, and when you are right there on the cusp, do you really realize and feel the magnitude from a playing standpoint of what's on the line from one game to the next? And then from a coaching standpoint, if players don't, how do you enforce that without creating extra tension or drama for them?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I don't think there's necessarily a exactly right answer. It probably depends a bit on the group. I will say this is the third time you brought up our loss in the Elite Eight to Wisconsin. I really don't appreciate that. No, I'm kidding.
You're the history guy, right?
Yeah, I'm teasing you. My kids will still not pick Wisconsin in their NCAA bracket. They were all over James Madison. They're like, so they're mad, and they were obviously not even born at that time. But so to answer, that's a way to answer your question. I was fully aware, and I knew the Final Four was in Indianapolis, and but during the game, I don't think that really factors in. It's just that in the back of your mind in the build-up to the game. When the game starts, you're just hooping. But this brings us back to their mindset. I think that mindset that this team has will trump everything if they can bottle that up and just keep it. Exact mindset they had this weekend. Like nothing is getting in the way of my best effort. And if they come up short, hey, that happens. But you could just tell that is a mission-bound operation that is out to make a statement. So I just think they just got to keep that mindset. Of course, they're going to know in the back of their mind, hey, it's a big deal. But they just keep that mindset, they'll be fine.
Former Purdue Boilermaker and current assistant coach at Army West Point with the Black Knights, Carson Cunningham, is our guest. Carson, you mentioned that mindset and that look in Zach Edey's eyes going off the bus and the disappointment from losing to a 16 a year ago to now, hey, not only is that going to not be the case, we're going to take care of Grambling State, we're going to take care of Utah State, and oh, by the way, we're going to go out and win the whole thing. That mindset from the coaching side of things, that only gets you so far, though, no? Like, how much of this is using that on Matt Painter's side of the ledger, using that mindset to get the most still out of this high-octane offense?
Yeah, I think they've really innovated. They've adapted. They've added a number of wrinkles, initiating their action with much more pace, a lot more staggered ball screens and inverted type of stuff. Like they're doing some really neat things, and I think guys' overall athleticism and wind is a little better. So don't get quite as worried with Edey on a switch as maybe you would have last year. I mean, it's still an issue, but shoot, he's an issue for them. So I think Coach Painter's put him in a great spot. At this point, you're kind of up there at the top of the sail, kind of watching the ship come in. I mean, you're guiding. Yeah, you got to make some important calls, but he's put him in a great position to bring this thing in and give the best effort and put him in the best position they can to get all the way there. And like I said, though, they're playing incredibly good teams. Like top 11, KenPom is top 7. I mean, what is it, like 6, 7, 11 or something in Ken Palm.
Yeah, and they've beaten, incredibly, Carson, they've beaten 6 of the Sweet 16, right? So they are battle tested.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that. I was going to ask you, in your opinion, what is Purdue's vulnerability?
Well, real quick, I think I used to use the shipping comparison where I should be using trains. But
That's right.
Anyway.
That's right.
the biggest weakness with Purdue?
Correct.
Is that what you're asking me?
If there was an area that you would say is a vulnerability for them, it would be what concern?
Well, you see the teams trying to do it every game, like Illinois tried to do it heavy. Oh, Minnesota tried to do it heavy. I mean, Utah State did its own version of it, which is getting Edey and ball screens and drop coverage. Now, Utah State, they tried to get a 4-5 switch and then have their 4-man, who's a little undersized and a little active, maybe attack that switch. And they got a couple buckets off it, but it didn't end up panning out. Obviously they're just overwhelmed. But they will. We're going to see probably a lot of that. Just either trying to pick and pop off the drop or getting Edey's feet moving. And seeing if you can play off that. And, I wouldn't say it's a weakness. It's just a reality of being 7-4. I mean, like I say, they got to deal with him. So his efficiency on offense has clearly been a boon to the team. And then and on defense, it's just that's probably the one area where teams will keep trying to drill down on is trying to get a little beep going against the big guys.
Carson, so much has been – Carson Cunningham is our guest. There's been a lot of discussion about, including here on this program, about like the quote-unquote X factors, right? You want to get Fletcher Lawyer shooting the ball well from the outside. You want to get, for that matter, Mason Gillis continuing to do what he does. To me, especially against Utah State, and I wanted you from a coaching standpoint or analysis standpoint to expand on this, I thought the movement in particular and just the overall offensive action of Trey Kaufman-Renn was really important because it then offset. If you're going to drop back on Edey, that's one thing. But now you've got a two-headed monster on the blocks, and that really opens up mid-range games to allow shooters to start getting in rhythm, and then they can step back and those threes start falling. Am I overstating that?
No, that was huge. And we reached a magic level, as Coach Katie used to call it, the magic level. And you could see that rhythm building. And he really Kaufman-Renn drew those fouls early, got them in foul trouble. He was really assertive in scoring. And so it was like a double whammy. All of a sudden he's scoring, they're in foul trouble, and you still have to deal with Edey. That's brutal for them, and it just was too much. They got overwhelmed, and like you suggested, things start loosening up on the perimeter for everybody. And you saw that. I mean, we got great looks, and then the ball was picking up energy and flying around and then getting out on the break, and just kind of blew that thing open. And it was, we got to keep that. I think it starts with that mindset, though. It sounds cliche in coach speak, but they are playing so hard and with such a purpose. I think that will be the key. There'll be different strategies employed by the opposition, and we might run into a stretch where you're not hitting or whatever, but as long as they keep that intensity and mission bound attitude, they're gonna put themselves in the best possible position to win. That's all you can ask for.
Carson, is there a player non-Zach Edey division that you enjoy watching the most on this team, or maybe that would be the most fun to coach?
Well, I played point guard, so obviously Braden Smith, his passing has just gone to another level. I mean, his ability to make very quick pick-and-roll reads, look guys off, find the right guy, his pacing and his timing on the break, change of speed, when to deliver the goods. That's fun. But I'm partial to point guard play, but, man, he's been a wonder. He was fantastic last year, but he's a whole different kind of animal at the point guard this year. So it's when he gets wheeling and dealing, it's fun to watch.
Is it too difficult to pinpoint perhaps which potential matchup or which team left in the Sweet 16? And I mean, look, Connecticut's outstanding, right? I mean, there's no doubt that Connecticut, when they're rolling, is a mountain to deal with. And Houston defensively is really, really good. But just from a schematic matchup, is there one team that you look at from their roster standpoint and say that could be a difficult matchup for Purdue if they were to face them?
Well, I don't know if it's so much the matchup. I mean, I know what you mean, and some people might pick a team with a lot of speed and a quick four that they'll play a little small, or a stretch five, But I don't know if that's really it. I would say it's more that Connecticut is so good. I mean, they're just so good that they're gonna be an issue for anybody. Obviously I think Purdue can beat them, but this is a team that won every NCAA tournament game, I think, by double digits last year. And if I'm not mistaken, they haven't lost. Did they win both by double digits this year? I think they did. I mean, it might be 8 NCAA tournament games in a row where it's not 10 points or you're winning by 10 points or more. That's kind of crazy. So obviously they're a really good college basketball team, but
yeah,
juggernaut,
yeah.
But every team at this point, you look at the tournament, it's not like some teams snuck in there. I guess maybe you could argue North Carolina State, but this year's Final 16, man, from a seeding standpoint is really good.
Carson, I went and attended IU, and I prefaced that to say that I also went and took my nephew, my brother-in-law, a couple people down to Bloomington to go see Indiana take on the Black Knights in November. And I have to be honest with you, like most of Assembly Hall, with that being a 1-point game at halftime and the way things went, I genuinely thought the Black Knights were going to be the first of many omens of what that season became for Indiana and pull off that win. Can you take me back to the bench of that just shooting display the Black Knights had and getting to be a part of that, what was near an upset at Assembly Hall?
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, we had 3 Indiana guys on our roster. We got 2 guys from Indianapolis coming in, Jackson Bell, North Central, Dylan Moran, Karen Catholic. So we recruit Indiana heavily. And we were, obviously excited, and it was really fun. When you're in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking about much, but just trying to score and trying to keep them from scoring. But the crowd there is loud. It's steep, and it's intense. So it was a really good environment for our guys, and but you want to win. So that was the frustrating part at the end. But yeah, I mean, I don't like to talk about Assembly Hall that much. I mean,
I understand.
No, but it
we can
is
go back to talking
an
about the
awesome
Wisconsin
place.
game if you'd like, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about Wisconsin next. How about that? Yeah.
You know what we could talk about, Carson? How about this to end it out? Alongside Hamilton is your latest book. Is that correct?
That's correct. A little historical fiction.
Okay, along with American Hoops, and you correct me if I'm wrong here. American Hoops, Fallen Stars, The 21st Century Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Before the Curse, The Chicago Cubs' Glory Years, and Underbelly Hoops. Does that cover all of them?
That's right. Yeah, I appreciate that.
The one with which you have the most pride would be which?
Oh, man, definitely Fallen Stars. It takes a look at the life and times of 5 war hero athletes who died in military service. So it starts with Hamilton Fish, who was the first Rough Rider killed in the Spanish-American War. Wealthy, elite family. Guy just volunteers to go fight for Cuban freedom and loses his life. And then Hobie Baker, he's, the hockey Heisman Trophy for hockey in the NCAA is called the Hobie Baker Award. And Hobie Baker was this incredible football player, hockey player from Princeton. He died in service in a plane crash as his planes had just gotten wheels like 8 years earlier. During World War I. And then Niall Kinnick, of course, in World War II, which Kinnick Stadium at Iowa, he was a Heisman Trophy winner. And then it looks at Bob Kalsu. Bob Kalsu was the only NFL player to die in the Vietnam War. I got to interview his wife, now widow, Barb, and that was deeply moving to read about his life and how he decided to just go, even though he could have gotten out of it. He was the rookie of the year for the Bills. And then Pat Tillman, of course, most everyone knows Pat Tillman's story from the Arizona Cardinals and in Afghanistan. So that was deeply moving, very kind of a emotional project to work on because of the time that you spend kind of deep diving, reading diaries, interviewing people about these guys' lives. But I definitely have to say that one. But I appreciate the shout on the books. Also, it's been nice to see. I do want to say that, I wrote that article on Purdue basketball and kind of its kind of bigger, deeper meaning. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback on that. I'm grateful for that. I wrote it because we cherish what Purdue's doing. We're grateful for it. And I thought, man, could I try to capture it in the form of an essay? So it's been nice to see that people could relate to what I was trying to express.
And people can find the essay to still read it where?
They can read it at Golden Black. And actually, my kids taught me to pin a tweet. I don't think I'd ever pinned a tweet. And they taught me how to pin a tweet on my Twitter, which is @CarsonJames43. But I think Purdue fans or people that really love Indiana and Indiana basketball, hopefully they'll enjoy it. But I've gotten a lot of neat feedback from people all over the country, and it's been really cool.
Carson James Cunningham is the pen name that he goes by. Carson Cunningham, the name he goes by in terms of Purdue lore, and Dr. Carson Cunningham, the assistant coach for West Point, also known as Army. Carson, we certainly appreciate the time, and I will simply say boiler up for you, even though I know that you are Army as well. But we appreciate the time today.
Thank you so much. Go Army, beat Navy.
I appreciate that.
All right.
Like care. That. Both of them, right? Go Army, beat Navy, and hammer down. I was at the Navy game against Air Force this year in football. So I guess I could say go Navy, beat Air Force, but I didn't have to throw Army into the mix.
I know he doesn't.
So good there.
I know rightfully so. He doesn't like talking about Assembly Hall, but Jake, that's a tie game with 3.5 to play. I legitimately thought Army was going to get that job done.
He's right. It is steep, right?
Yeah.
It is steep. Kevin Harlan joined us just before the Super Bowl, and now amidst March Madness, he's going to do it again next.
Business.
Purdue moves on to Detroit after playing and winning in Indianapolis. The guy that was on the television call for that, and of course his voice needs no introduction, but Kevin Harlan, who I believe is now in Boston to call UConn, San Diego State, Iowa State, and Illinois, joins us on the program. Kevin, I'm going to get right to this question, and thank you for the time. We were just discussing this with Carson Cunningham, but I want your thought on it because you saw them now. If you were trying to find an area of vulnerability about Purdue, it would be what?
Thanks for having me on. I don't know that I really see anything right now. They've got the chip on the shoulder from last year and what has kind of been a recent history for the program. I think that is serving them well. They've got incredible determination and grit. They have got every role you'd want on a team. That box is check, 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 check. I think they've got plenty of depth, clearly. You know what? I don't know that I can see a whole lot there that would get away. I mean, if for whatever reason, Edey would have a foul issue in the first half and taken out, can the team adjust? I think they can. I think they've got enough, and not necessarily with another big. I think they can play a lot of different ways. I mean, they could bring in Berg, I guess, but I mean, I think they've got enough parts to handle almost any situation that would come up. I've done them 3 times. I did them up in Ann Arbor when they beat Michigan for CBS, and we had the games over the weekend. And you look at them and you say, is this role filled? Yep. Is that role filled? Check it. Can they do this? Yep. Can they go deep? Yep. Coaching, clearly. Cohesive, absolutely. And do they have a chip on the shoulder? And I think that serves as, if you need any, extra motivation. And I like that. I like that recipe.
Kevin Harlan is our guest. Kevin, when you look at the remaining teams, 1-5, 3-2, 1-4, 6-2, 2-3, 1-5, 11-2, 1-4, a lot of top seeds still left in the dance. In fact, teams that were ranked within like the top 15 or 16 of a lot of metrics are still the majority stakeholders of this edition of March Madness. Should we have expected this all along, given how dominant some of these teams have been, or is there still a feeling of the unpredictability of the magic that is this tournament?
Well, I think there is some unpredictability still ahead in the final 16 teams. Personally, and not because we're going there, Boston seems to me to like to be. That's going to be. I don't know if there's a. I mean, clearly the defending champion is there and basically in their backyard, and that experience will serve them well. And they've had a terrific season, and their seeding would tell you that where they are overall. But Illinois and Iowa State are rugged, hard teams. And I had a guy tell me one time, start counting the NBA players or prospects on each of the teams, and that will give you an indication of where that team might go. Well, I took that formula last year, and I had Arkansas out in Vegas. That was UConn out there and UCLA, and who else? There was one more to Gonzaga. And Gonzaga had a couple NBA kids. Arkansas had 4 NBA kids, and they were both gone and whacked by UConn. So I would tell you that while you could use that certainly as a way to guide you through these next 16 teams, unpredictability should be, I think, at the forefront. You just don't know. Sometimes Houston getting pushed by A&M the other night, that was, I don't know if a lot of people saw that coming, but you get some momentum in these games, and they're still kids at the end of the day, although we've got older kids. We've got 23 and 24-year-old kids taking advantage of the COVID year, which is great. But even then, if a little doubt creeps in, you just don't know if that's going to send you sideways. And that's the great thing about the tournament. You just don't know who's going to catch fire. and a team could easily do that here in the next couple weeks.
Kevin, a year ago, San Diego State was that team, right? I mean, they obviously got their way into the national championship game. Here they are again, rematch with Connecticut. I'll admit I've kind of slept on San Diego State just because of the time difference in the league and the times that they played. This is a weird way of saying it. Are they as legit as a year ago, or are they starting to see ceiling for San Diego State?
I don't know. They're recruiting well. They've got momentum. There was a lot of talk before the Pac-12 imploded that they were going to go to the Pac-12. Their football program has a respectable feel to it, and certainly their basketball now is on a national stage. They've kind of recruited the same player. They stress the defense. They like long, athletic kids. They've got it again. They lost a couple kids from last year's team, but they pick right up, and they survived a difficult Mountain West. What was it, 5 teams from that conference made the tournament, 6 or whatever it was. They had a real rugged, Utah State we saw, and Purdue took care of them. But again, reflective of that conference, it was hard to win out there. That conference is good, and so I think it's terrific that they've made it again, feeding into the thought process that with the transfer portal, with NIL, and with extra years, these kids are taking advantage, going to the graduate senior seasons. All these programs have got to be viewed as dangerous because they're putting kids on the floor that have played major conference minutes, and it's paying off, and they're carrying that to the next stop, and it's benefiting those next schools.
Lastly, Kevin, I wanted to touch on this because you, Kevin Harlan, would have, obviously you see coaches and games unfold before you throughout the course of the year from all avenues and aspects. Can you take a second maybe to just kind of, if there was a moment, maybe there wasn't, but your overall impressions of Matt Painter, and I don't mean in totality of the year, but rather maybe even at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, just watching his demeanor or his leadership within his team, and just how maybe that compares, contrasts, or is similar to other coaches?
Well, I'll tell you this. There were NBA scouts there. There were NBA scouts up in Ann Arbor when I did that game about a month ago. And Stan Van Gundy is one of my partners, and he said of all the teams he watched, the one coach with the schemes he appreciated the most were Matt Painter's, and that he actually took out a notepad and started to draw and diagram many of the sets and schemes that Matt has. And in talking to the NBA scouts prior to and in Indy last weekend, I would say he is one of the top 5 most respected coaches with the way he runs his program in all of college basketball. Now, Purdue sometimes is not lumped with Kansas and Kentucky and North Carolina and Duke, and maybe even Izzo up in Michigan State, but they should be, because he gets the kids, he coaches the kids, he plays them, they stay. So he's like the envy of all these coaches. Everybody wants a program like Purdue. Everybody. They don't want these kids coming for a year and they're gone. They want kids who are committed to getting better, want to be a part of something bigger than they are. And one of the few environments in all of college basketball that has that right now is Purdue. And it's sometimes you're so close to it, you start to see the warts, and that's true in any sport with any team and any coach and any player. But when you widen the lens and you look at it from a distance, there are few coaches as respected as Matt, and there are few programs that are envied as much as Purdue. They keep their kids, they teach their kids, they watch them grow. They're truly college players. Now you got Lance Jones, and he's but he first thing he came in and said, "How can I help? Where can I play? What can I do?" The last question he asked was about it. In fact, I don't even think he asked about NIL, because the first question in all these high school kids that are top 50 and are in the portal looking to move from one school to the next is how much money and how many starts can you guarantee me? And Matt he may have the fewest number of kids like that in the country. Yet here they are again top seed, top 5, and they're moving to the Sweet 16. I would say, if I'm a Purdue fan, I'm saying, thank God I got this kid who continues it from Katie to him. He's been around for almost 2 decades. Before that, an assistant, and he's run this program the way he's run it at a respectable school, not only academically, but just the way they have carried out that program. I would say, thank goodness, this is a program I can really wrap myself around.
And Kevin, it feels to me like he's like Jay Wright. If he breaks through and gets it, then it's like Katie barred the door, but you can look at it and say it was done the right way, and that's something I think that everybody can get behind.
Yep.
Kevin
Absolutely.
Harlan, you're going to be on the call, right? UConn, San Diego State, and Iowa State, Illinois. Are those the games you've got in Boston?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Well,
Hey, just don't forget to remind Stan Van Gundy, your broadcast partner, about Knuckles premiering on Paramount Plus when you're doing those live reads. Remember,
Can you believe I'm reading that stuff? Like, honest to God, I mean, I've not seen the show. I'm sure it's great, but like, when
I
saw
haven't
that,
either.
I thought, what am I like? I have no idea what that is, but I've got to read it, and I'm happy to read it. I will read it, but don't ask me about it. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Literally,
Kevin,
I am walking. I'm feeling my way through the dark on some of the. I have no idea what I'm saying.
well, Stan Van Gundy once adopted a dog that was the only dog remaining in a shelter after it cleaned the shelters in Michigan, and it was a dog with a deformity, and Stan Van Gundy gave him a home. So be sure to thank him
Oh my gosh.
from Indianapolis about Eastwood, the dog that he got.
Great. Listen, Indy may be our most favorite stop to come to. You can walk to the great restaurants, terrific hotels, tons to do, great building. Both the NFL. I mean, I do a lot of NFL games in that place, but that Cambridge place, terrific venue for basketball. I'd do a game in Indy every week if I could. I'd love coming there, and I can't wait for the start of the NFL season to get back there.
Well, Kevin,
and watch your quarterback in his second year.
Well, Kevin, we love having you. Thank you again, as always, for being so gracious with the time, and looking forward to following along both the rest of the NCAA tournament and then hearing you along for the call as the NBA playoffs approach.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Hope we're in Indy for that too. I forgot about the pay. That's right. That team is going to make they're going to make life difficult for some higher seeds. I guarantee you.
That's the hope. That's the hope. And we'll see you on the call for the NBA playoffs. How's that, Kevin Harlan? Kevin, appreciate it.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All right, Kevin Harlan, again, the great sports broadcaster. He's going to have, that's going to be a big one, actually, those two that are in Boston.
You brought up yesterday,
UConn, San Diego
Jake.
State, you forget about, right?
Right. You brought up that exact point yesterday. Where is your favorite region for where the most highly contested matchups could happen? And he makes a strong case. You have that rematch of San Diego State and UConn from a year ago, and then Iowa State and Illinois, another pair of the top teams in the country going at it. He might be right. That might be the best region to see the action come this weekend.
By the way, Eddie, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder?
I always have it, Jake.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and fire it up if we could. I started out the show by saying there are times where I feel old. This is one of those where, Jimmy, I'll let you do it because this is breaking news that comes via Instagram, right?
Yes.
Every time I get on Instagram, all I see is Britney Spears dancing naked in her living room.
Well, that's usually an algorithm, Jake. So I just everybody to look at what you've been giving thumbs up and thumbs down to on the IG reels. But anyway, this has been from a couple of different spots reported.
Look right here. What's popping up? I open up Instagram. Eddie, what do you see?
Is that Britney Spears?
Yes, she's dancing naked in her living room. It's the only thing that ever happens.
Well, she's got clothes on.
Well, keep watching the video, okay?
This was reported by a couple of outlets, but we'll go with John Rothstein, national college basketball reporter. Indiana's Khalil Ware will enter the 2024 NBA draft per his Instagram page. Now, I don't know how deep in the weeds you want to go with this. Eddie made it seem like that the post itself was lackluster in terms of its commitment to the leap, but it's been reported by multiple outlets that is what he's going to do. Eddie, if you want to elaborate on that, feel free, because I have not seen the Instagram post.
Yeah, it's a rather weird post. All it says is it's him thanking for his time in Indiana, thanking the coaching staff, his teammates, and his family, and then it just says, I love you all. It just says, been a pleasure to wear the cream and crimson and have an opportunity to play for the greatest fans in the world. Like, there's nothing in there that says that he's committing to going to the NBA draft, and there's nothing in there that really says that he's going into the portal either. So that's the part I was like, It's a little confusing to me.
Yeah, I would assume it's been pushed behind the scenes because Jeff Rabjohns has this story now. Same headline: Indiana star big man Khalil Ware entering the 2024 NBA draft. Assuming that is the case, Jake, no surprise here that this is what was ultimately the conclusion of his 1 year in Indiana, that he would go professionally.
I'm watching this Instagram video. Hang on just a second. It appears as though, like, I didn't know.
Sounds like Shannon's in for a fun night.
Well, here's the thing. So on Instagram, I've told you this before, and then we'll get to Khalil Ware. When the Threads was a thing, remember that like 12 hours where Threads was a thing?
Yeah, it still exists, but I don't use it.
So in order to get a Threads account, I had to sign up for Instagram.
Sure.
So I signed up for Instagram, and Shannon was there, and I'm like, now how do I do the Instagram thing?
Wait a second. You consider yourself one of the most handsome mans on the face of the earth, and you don't have Instagram?
Oh, man. Jake could be the influencer of all influencers if he was to hit the stage.
Right?
People know where to find me. So, so at any rate, somehow or another, I began following Britney Spears. And from what I can tell, it's the only account that I follow.
There you go. That's why
so literally every
way.
time I get on, all I see is Britney Spears. There's usually a couple of dogs and then Britney Spears dancing around. And I don't know. Sometimes she has knives. Sometimes she's naked. It's very strange.
When you created the account, did it just have suggested accounts for you to follow and you were like, oh, Britney Spears, that's good enough for me? Or did you go and seek it out yourself?
No, my guess is I have no, and I'm being totally serious, kidding aside, I have no idea how I began following her. My guess is because I would assume that she's like one of the most followed accounts on Instagram. So it probably was the first one that popped up.
Yeah.
And then Shannon was probably showing me like, well, here's what you do to follow somebody.
Sure.
I'm never on there.
Right.
Now back to Khalil Ware. So
this has been foregone that he was going to go.
Correct.
I think since about
because this is
midway.
Khalil Ware is a wonderful talent, and I will give him credit. He had a reputation coming in from Oregon that was not good about his drive or lack thereof. The last half of the year, and in particular the last quarter of the season when he came off of injury, he played really well and really hard, and I think was one guy that if you're an Indiana fan, you got to tip your cap and say, look, that guy went down swinging basically in every game. But as it was explained to me by a couple of people from the NBA standpoint, talent-wise, he is a top 10 pick, but his reputation may hurt him still into the 15 to 20 range. But this is a draft that is very dry and void of deep talent. So if he were to come back next year, even if he were to be unbelievable, he may not next year eclipse into the top 15 because of the depth as it's perceived of next year's draft. Thus, it is most advantageous for him to do it now. And so, yes, it was a foregone conclusion. Now, the other curveball, to be honest, is Mackenzie Mbako, who we haven't heard anything from. But those reasons, Mackenzie Mbako, because of the tout about him coming in and the perception of him, his reputation precedes him in a positive manner. And it didn't necessarily always come through on the floor, but he started to show some things offensively at the end of the year that might percolate a bubble for him, and maybe he explores that. But Ware seemingly was the foregone conclusion. The big coup for Indiana at this point, quite frankly, is the fact that Malik Renew is going to return as opposed to entering the portal, at least as of now.
Everyone knows that soaking in Epsom salts can make
Jimmy, when I was in college, I had several of my high school buddies. Did you have anybody from Ron College that went to Hanover?
I'm sure there were, but nobody that I'm still close with.
So a lot of my high school buddies went to Hanover. My sister went to Hanover as well. And Hanover College, like literally half the school are kids from the Indianapolis area, and the other half are kids from Louisville. And so I spent a lot of time at Hanover, and then became buddies with a lot of guys that were born and raised in Louisville. And then right after college, my high school buddies, they all moved to Louisville. So I spent a lot of time in the city of Louisville in, my late 20s, early 30s, and loved it. And in that capacity, I became kind of a fan of Louisville basketball. I was always an IU fan, and I hate Kentucky, so that helped it to root for Louisville. So I became kind of a Louisville fan. And I've always kind of paid attention to Louisville basketball just, in that regard. And the coaching search for University of Louisville right now, to me, is fascinating because, the latest target now, there are two names that have come into play, and I'm sure JMV will have more on this on his show, but and these things are changing constantly by the hour, I realize. Richard Pitino is one of the names that's been linked in Louisville. But then the other developing star, apparently, is that of Josh Schertz at Indiana State. Now, Matt Jones, who does Kentucky Sports Radio, sent a tweet. Apparently, Bob Valvano, who I think is Jim Valvano's brother, correct? And a color announcer for University of Louisville. Bob Valvano had said on his radio show that Josh Schertz had told him that Dusty May got death threats from Louisville fans, and that's why he didn't take the job. Now he's saying, no, that was just a joke. Valvano did send a tweet essentially saying, hey, I said some irresponsible things. But the irony is, if Josh Schertz is the one that was saying that Dusty May told him that, Josh Schertz is now apparently a name mentioned with the Louisville job. Josh Schertz can coach, man.
Yeah.
And his innovative offense, Derek Schultz earlier today was telling me, and I agree with Derek, the innovation of his offense would make him intriguing for any job at any level, right?
It is. I didn't think that would be the leap for Schertz right away. I didn't think you would go from Indiana State to, as you mentioned, a job that is still viewed by many as a perennial job in all of college athletics. So I would be, my heart would break for JMV, for Indiana State fans, if that jump eventually does happen. I think it's the same thing for me as a kid when we had Butler season tickets and you see all the Butler coaches that do well there and then eventually they take a leap. So I'd sympathize with that. But yeah, if you're Schertz, I don't know that you could pass on an opportunity like that, right?
Have the Schertz rumors to St. Louis just kind of fallen off? Because I thought
that is also an excellent question.
That's where I thought he was going.
I think everybody thought that. But listen, if you're going to go coach in an old river city at a university named after the city itself, you would take Louisville over St. Louis, right?
Yeah.
If he has – listen, I covered St. Louis basketball. And when Lorenzo Romar was there.
The Billikens.
And they play in a cool arena. But their facilities – now, I'm talking 20 years ago, so maybe they've done a lot of upgrade. But the facilities they had were pretty old. And the reality is SLU basketball was Horizon League Butler pre-Final Four in terms of the level of oomph factor it got in the city. It had some push. There was some interest in it in St. Louis. But well behind. There were very few people that were all in, die hard, I'm a Billiken through and through. It's kind of a cool school. But it does feel like, to me, St. Louis University, now the money that they're willing to pay is far beyond what he could make at Indiana State. So I get that. But it does feel a little bit like, from a basketball standpoint, lateral movement. But we'll see. There's a lot going on.
And look, maybe he has continued to develop as a coach, but the Richard Pitino link, didn't go well at Minnesota.
Well, we know.
But no, I get
there,
why
right?
with his dad.
Correct.
I understand it makes sense that he was an associate head coach at one point in time back 13 years ago. But I feel like you've seen Pitino get the top-level job, and I get it. Resources are different at Louisville than they are at Minnesota, most definitely.
I'm in agreement with you.
But
I mean, if Richard
seen this
Pitino was a
ride.
Louisville-level coach, we would know it by now.
Correct.
Yeah. Stephen Holder joins us next.
Okay, I'm ready to record my jewelry stores.
Cards on the table. I didn't watch a lot of XFL
Okay.
either time. but I just have seen a clip of what the kickoff setup looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's jarring. Like, it's going to be jarring the first time that a viewer winds up seeing it, because you have both the offensive and defensive special teams, or I guess, the opposing and the home and away.
Right, the
the
lineup.
lineup of the special teams out there. They're both standing like maybe 5 yards apart at the opposite 30 and 35-yard line, respectively. Then it's a massive gap of land either way from where the guy's kicking to where the people are returning. Like, it's weird, but it looks like you're going to get more returns out of this. Like, it looks like you're going to get more chances for high electric plays like kickoffs used to be.
Speaking of returns, I just did my taxes.
How'd that go?
We're in the second round with the account. Good, but I owe. And last year I got a return. And I'm like, wait a minute.
You probably did the same thing as last year, though, right?
Almost essentially. And I also have money withheld with each check.
I always wind up owing because...
in other words, I have 0 exemptions. And then in addition to that, I have additional money withheld. And I still owed.
See, I always end up owing because I am not smart enough to withhold when I get my independent broadcasting
Right.
stuff. And so I owe it at the end, but...
I'm one of those, like, I'm not ready to go, like, throw tea anywhere. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it's a pretty good country. I don't mind living here. I know that I'm fortunate in that regard,
Sure.
right? I mean, I'm not Colonel Parker, but joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so, he is down in Orlando in his home state of Florida at the NFL, we would say owners meetings, but we'll just say NFL meetings where they're changing all kinds of rules. Stephen Holder joins us. Stephen, I said earlier in terms of the rules changes, I don't understand them, and I'm not sure I care. Is that wrong of me?
We're so far away from the season that it is hard to care right now. I think that's how I typically feel about these things. And then we get to training camp, or actually we get like to the preseason, and they're actually playing games, and then it dawns on us again, like, oh man, I forgot about that, So, and then it becomes something that's actually being put into practice. So for right now, you don't have to care that much, but you will at some point have to care because it will have a big impact on the game, if not in terms of actual yardage and such. It will the kickoff rule in particular will have a big impact in terms of what it looks like, So that part I would say is, you're right to an extent, but you will care at some point if you watch football.
So here's the bottom line, Stephen, for those that are just tuning in or are unaware of what has taken place. The NFL has passed rules changes in certainly 2 areas. One of them in the way kickoffs will look, and the other in terms of legality of some tackles. Is there more than just that, or are those just the 2 that are making headlines?
Those are the 2 big ones. There's a smaller one, but it's more procedural. They have changed the date of the trade deadline, which means absolutely nothing right now. The only reason it will potentially matter later is that it may give teams a little more time to consider their situations and then make decisions accordingly. So I think they're going to push it back a little bit, so to make it a bit later. So in that regard, I think it could be beneficial to some teams. But anyway, the big news is unquestionably what you were talking about earlier, the kickoff rules and the hip drop tackle, neither of which is easy to explain, but both important in terms of how the game will be played.
What do you make of the change to the kickoff rules? 'Cause I don't know if we had you connected at that point, but as I told Jake, I didn't watch a ton of XFL. I did just watch a clip of a kickoff in the second iteration of the XFL, and I mean, I feel like there's a chance it could bring back the excitement of kickoff returns, assuming players are going to be willing to go ahead and take it out and go try to bring one to the house.
So, yeah, I'm kind of with you. My take on it is that I don't know if this is the ultimate answer, like the answer that's going to rectify all the problems. But what I will say is that what they have done the last year or so is awful, which means basically they have preordained that there would be no kickoff returns. And it's boring. It has erased an element of the game that is really exciting. And I think they were right to step up and say, wait a minute, we don't want that. So that was the only thing everybody agreed on, is that This sucks. So the question then becomes, how do you fix it? And that is much harder. So this is an effort, but I think a first step toward fixing it. I mean, I just got out of Roger Goodell's press conference, and he himself said, look, this is effectively our first go-around. It will be tweaked more than likely in the future. I think they want to let this play out. It's a little bit of a trial run to a degree, but there's also the chance it could work out really well and they keep it the way it is. But at minimum, they are not, it doesn't seem like, going back to having kickoffs so far up the field that touchbacks are basically a formality. Fans don't want that. The NFL doesn't want that. You might as well, in my opinion, just do it like, Kansas tiebreaker style or something. Just put the ball at the 25. Obviously, the other direction, not going into your opponent's territory. But, so just in effect, in theory, kind of the same principle. Just spot the ball at the 25-yard line and let's just get rid of the kickoff if that's what you're going to do. That's where we were at last season. That doesn't help anybody. And, they've taken enough fun out of football as it is, right? So let's not make it worse. So we'll see. I applaud the effort. The question is, will this be the answer? We'll see.
Stephen, one of the things that also came out is that there will be, and I want you to stop me when I'm misinterpreting or misquoting here, okay? There will be 2 games played on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
The teams that play on those 2 games, which is a Wednesday this week, also will play in the prior Saturday. So you're looking at basically, 4 days off between games. Does this mean essentially that there are going to be 4 teams in the National Football League that are going to kick and scream about the fact they have to play on Christmas?
Well, yeah, it sucks for them. I mean, it's not a competitive advantage in those particular games, but it's not good for the overall well-being of your team, most likely. You're probably not going to say that. And when I say not a competitive advantage, meaning, if the Dolphins and Titans are going to play on Christmas Day, they both have the same disadvantage, right? That is obvious. However, there also are things like who has to travel, and if you are on a particularly rough stretch of injuries, that's going to affect you worse on a short week. Those kinds of things. So look, the take of the league or their position. Roger Goodell was just asked about this, and his position is, look, what's the big deal? We already play on 4 days rest just about every week. They also, I think it would be like 3 games if they play the week before the teams involved. I believe it would be 3 games in 11-day stretch, I think. And so he said that has happened before. For example, during the COVID season in 2020. What I would say to that is, well, yes, but that was, because of a global emergency. but you do you, right? But I'm not surprised. It's definitely unconventional. I mean, we don't play football on Wednesdays generally outside of the MAC conference, but it's a lot. It's definitely new, but I think what this tells you, it just reinforces that for the NFL, boundaries matter a lot less. What matters now is, are there new frontiers that we can conquer? And the frontiers basically are meaning like revenue streams. So they will break rules, to generate additional revenue. That is where we're at, and that's just what it's going to be. Just like they're going to have an additional playoff game on streaming this year. I believe Amazon, for example. So that's just where we are. That's the world, and it's not going the other way. It's never going to go the other way. They have broken down those barriers and those. They have broken all the rules at this point. So I don't think they have any fear of doing it because people keep coming back. People keep watching, right? So they're not going the other way.
Stephen Holder of ESPN.com is our guest. Stephen, as you understand it, both with the hip drop tackle and with some of the modifications they've made for roughing the passer, intentional grounding, how involved now will the sky judge or the assistant referees be to help both expedite the way things are called and make sure that the bar league, the integrity of the game is upheld?
Yeah, I mean, on the hip drop, I mean, we don't know the answers on those questions, but I think the answer is most likely not very involved. So on the hip drop tackle, here's the reality that I think you will learn over time. You probably won't see it flagged very often. Okay, like I know that probably sounds like a disconnect, right?
You think it'll be more after the fact punishments like fines and of that nature?
100%. In fact, they have already strongly hinted at that. Rich McKay, who's the co-chairman of the competition committee, president of the Atlanta Falcons, I mean, he has talked about this. He talked about it with a media conference call last week, in fact, that I was on, and he said that, look, there's a thin line between a legal hip drop tackle, if you will. Like there's shades, right? There are shades of that play. Some are more egregious than others. What they are targeting are the more egregious examples, which are the ones where there's sort of a twisting action with the tackler from behind that puts a lot of torque on the offensive player and his body. Those are the ones that they're looking for. The problem is you can't really legislate that in a split-second scenario. It's just almost impossible to legislate that in a split-second scenario. So if you look, the perfect example to look to is the plays in which you see fines assessed for players lowering their helmet, right? You see that from time to time. On a Thursday or Friday, you'll get an announcement that running back X is fined, $8,000 for lowering his head and using his head for, with forcible contact with the crown of his head. And the reason they do that is because they go back through the tape of every game and look for infractions. They do that. Troy Vincent and his staff, they do that every week in the football operations staff. And so that's what happens is they then, after the fact, go through and legislate those things. That is what's going to happen here in large part. That's what I'm expecting with the hip drop, which is probably going to be a little more frustrating for players, even because it's going to be something where if you're going to outlaw something, well, I mean, if it's not allowed, then it should be flagged during the game, right? But it's so hard to legislate that they can't even do that. So I don't know, man. It's probably going to be something where I hope they're going to really punish the egregious versions, because I just think the line is so thin that it's going to be hard for players to abide, frankly.
Stephen Holder is our guest. You can read his coverage of the NFL at ESPN.com when you don't see him on ESPN television as well. He is at the NFL meetings in Orlando. Stephen, I want to ask this. The Colts' representation at said meetings involve what personnel?
So you've got obviously head coach and general manager. They're always at these things. Shane Steichen, Chris Ballard, who we being local writers talked to this morning. We can get into that if you want. Chris Ballard, that is. Anyhow, beyond that, you're talking about Pete Ward, the COO, some other members of the front office who people may not know that well, and then those who you do know would be the Irsay daughters. Jim Irsay is not in attendance, but the Irsay daughters are here. They have always been in attendance at these meetings and are actively involved. I know Carly, I believe Kalen Irsay as well might be on actual ownership committees of. I don't remember which ones in particular, but that's important. If you're at the ownership level and you're involved, that is one way to have influence in the NFL is to get on to various committees, ownership committees. Jim Irsay himself, for example, is a key member of committees like the Finance Committee, which is the one where they talk about their money. So let me tell you, that one matters, right? So anyhow, that's a rundown of the players who are here. And so when it comes to things like voting on rules changes, those decisions are made at the ownership level. So those decisions or those representations fall to presumably his daughters at that point. Obviously, Jim Irsay can be looped into that conversation because he is engaged and so forth, but he is not present at these meetings.
Okay, and I'm not listen, I'm not trying to make a storyline where it doesn't exist. That's why I'm asking for this for the clarification. Has there been discussion amongst, like, has Jim Irsay's absence, I realize the daughters are there, so the family is represented. Has the absence of Jim Irsay from the owners or the league meetings been a topic of conversation amongst other owners to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. I think they expected it. I think they were of the understanding that he wouldn't be here or didn't expect that he would be. I didn't expect him to be here, so I presume they know as much as I know, at least. so I don't think there was any expectation that he was coming, if that makes sense. So his not being here wasn't something that took people by surprise. Certainly lots of people want to know, hey, how is he doing? What have you heard? I've heard that question from people from other teams, for example. Personnel from other teams have asked me that. I can answer the question to the best of my ability, which is not very well, but I think he's doing okay under the circumstances that we understand. So, I think we'll see what happens. The next milepost for us in terms of seeing Jim Irsay will be the NFL draft. I think, for us locally, we'll see what happens there. He's very present during the draft. He talks to media after the draft's conclusion. He loves that part. I think the draft is something that he really looks forward to. He likes to be actively involved in that draft room, as you know, and talk to the prospect, when they get on the phone and after the call is made. So that's the next question. Is he involved at all in that process? And that will tell us a little bit more.
Any takeaways from what Chris Ballard had to say today?
Plenty, yes. I think certainly my first question to him was, look, a lot of Colts fans are not happy with you, or at least they have questions, put it that way. I think not happy is probably too strong. I think just people just are wondering, right? You've re-signed all of your key players, but you kept it all in-house for the most part. And he says, yes, I get it. His take on that is, number one, the players we signed were players who were in demand. And I do think I agree with that. There are players who, had they hit the market, would have been players who would have been paid handsomely to play elsewhere. So that's the first thing. The other thing is his big takeaway, I think the overarching quote, the money quote, whether you agree with it or not, and I'll put it in a story that I'm going to file here when I get another cup of coffee. His big takeaway quote, I thought, was that different doesn't mean better. Now, there will be many different takes on that quote, but I think it is something he strongly believes in. And he takes offense to the idea like, oh, you guys aren't spending money. He says, we damn well spent money, a hell of a lot of it too. And that is certainly a defensible position. The question is, where you spend it and all that. And then the last thing I would say to put a bow on it is regarding the money. He said, look, you have resources and you have to allocate them as you see fit. And we allocated them to the players who made sense for us, and those were their players. And they did that only, he said, after attempting to land one or two other big fish players that just didn't work out. And then after that, the most sensible course of action was to re-sign their players, he said.
Colts beat writer for ESPN.com, Stephen Holder, is our guest. Stephen, I'm going to make a disclaimer up front with this next question of this being a reckless, gross misrepresentation question that I want you to clarify for me, because I feel like some Colts fans, when they read one of the tweets you had yesterday, they could think the following. This was during your exchange with Shane Steichen, and the last tweet you mentioned was the last point that he made is key. The single biggest reason the Colts have basically run it back with their roster is because they are convinced Richardson is a difference maker who can help them take a leap. Now, the gross misrepresentation of that would be to say that the Colts are so confident in Anthony Richardson and the roster they had last year they felt there was no need to improve outside of the building because you didn't get a fair evaluation of Richardson with that roster. So I realize that's probably a gross misrepresentation. That is not what the Colts went to go do. But when you read that, it's hard to not look at it and say, so wait a minute, they think that Anthony Richardson is going to be like every other great quarterback where he's going to mask our failings or our weak spots because of how good he is.
Well, I'll start by saying it's not. It may be a misrepresentation, but maybe not a gross misrepresentation. And here's why I say that, because there is a belief that had he played 17 games, and I realize what kind of leap that is because he came well short of that, but had he played 17 games, there is a belief in the organization they not only make the playoffs, but probably win several more games. I think there's a strong sentiment of that. It's an unprovable fact, right? I mean, you can't prove it. It's just it's an assertion, right?
Right.
So you can't disprove it or prove it. But the point is, it speaks to their conviction about him. Look, I think that just even if you believe that, that doesn't mean that you just disregard any other potential moves. So
well, and they're going to inherently upgrade the roster in the draft, right?
Correct.
Like that they're forced to do that either way.
Correct. That's the big thing. I mean, look, as I've said consistently, I mean, a very likely scenario, okay, a very likely scenario right now, as we sit here today, is they could have the number one corner on the board, whoever that is in their estimation, right? It's just flavors, if you like this guy versus that guy. But they could very well have the number one cornerback in the NFL draft staring at them at number 15 and say, okay, hey, thank you very much. Go over here to right cornerback and start. And frankly, I'm fine with that. You know, that's an upgrade. That is an upgrade, theoretically, right? Until we see it. So that is something they have in their pocket. I would also point out they have re-engaged talks with safety Julian Blackmon. That's something that Chris Ballard revealed today. So I think that's moving in a positive direction. Could happen. We will see. But I walked away feeling like they will absolutely sign a free agent safety at some point. They're in no hurry. There's lots of safeties out there. There's a glut of them, in fact, because there were several of them cut, in fact. So that position, I think, will be addressed here soon, potentially. And then I think corner is a position where they also feel like the corners that were available in this free agency period, they didn't think very much of them, frankly. It sounds like. I mean, obviously, Snead was available, L'Jarius Snead. We've had that conversation, but that was a much different, type of acquisition. So, anyhow, there will be moves made in the secondary, either signing a safety, drafting a corner, whatever. They're not done. Clearly, they're not done. He did make that point, Chris Ballard, on several occasions.
Stephen, you mentioned getting a second cup of coffee. Now, Shane Steichen is usually one aspirin from a coma, but you asked him a question earlier today that you tweeted out his answer where he looks like he had just bonged a gallon of Red Bull, and that's unusual for him. Can you let our listeners know what it was that you asked that all of a sudden awakened this football geek fanaticism out of Shane Steichen?
Yeah. So the question was for a story that I was working on down the line. I asked him, I said, everything I heard about Anthony Richardson initially in the draft process last year was about, he's this big, strong guy. Look at this big arm. Look how strong and fast he is. And I said, why did no one talk about the fact that his football savvy is actually at a very impressive level? He sees things that he's supposed to see. He has great awareness in the pocket. He feels pressure, all of that. I know we only had 4 games to really digest some of that, but if you watch his college tape, you see it. You actually see it. He's not trying to run. He actually sits in the pocket and tries to make a play before he gets out of there, like a disciplined quarterback. And he just ran with that. He said, yes. He said, like, this guy, he is on it. He talked about an instance. You can go back and watch the Tennessee Titans game, the first Tennessee Titans game, where Anthony Richardson had a strong start in that game before he got knocked out of it. And he talked about a play where they had certain progressions drawn up for Anthony Richardson, and they sent Josh Downs on this jet motion, which is pre-snap across the formation, sort of at an arc, in an arc fashion, if you will. And the Titans missed it and didn't react to it. They didn't adjust their coverage. And Richardson saw it before the snap and knew immediately where he was going, just completely ignored his progressions and threw it right to Downs. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but what Shane was saying was you get these robotic young quarterbacks, and they do it. They're like a puppy dog, right? You tell a dog to sit, the dog sits. And so he said in this case, he didn't say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I know I probably should throw it over there, but coach says you got to go through progression 1, 2, and 3, and then you got to figure it out if you have to. But no, he immediately said, no, I'm a quarterback. My job is to make the right play. That's the right play. So those are the kinds of things where I feel like those kinds of things excite Shane Steichen, because he's trying to get to the next level. He's trying to get his guys to think at the next level, because he damn well is at the next level, right? This guy he has some football genius in him, which is everything everyone has ever told me about him. So when he sees his quarterback making, sort of mental progressions like that, and steps and making progress like that, that's very evident. He really gets excited about it, and you see it in that clip, no doubt about it.
Steven, you going to head over to our Disney, are you? Epcot?
Let me tell you something. It's spring break in Indy. My wife and my daughter flew in here last night, and they're at the parks right now. Okay, I dodged today, but we still got a few more days, so I will be dragged to the House of Mouse.
Now, hold on. Which character is your favorite? Like, if you're going to be walking around the park and you got to get your photo taken, like I want to give you an assignment. So, who's your favorite character if you were going to get a photo while they're walking around?
Good question. I feel like Pluto doesn't get enough love.
That's good.
It's a good call.
That's a good call.
Why? Like, what's wrong with him?
Pluto's cool.
He's a good dog. Good dog.
Okay, now, and then there's Goofy also. Is he also Disney, or is he Looney Tunes? He's Disney, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's true. Why are there two dogs?
Well, it's like Boomer and Bowser before Bowser went and lived at a farm for a while. Okay, so I'm going to go with Goofy. That was your initial answer, right?
I said Pluto, but...
Or Pluto. Okay, Pluto.
Yeah.
So, Goofy's got the big floppy ears, and he's got a dental problem. So Pluto, you're good. I want, by the time, if you are in vicinity of Pluto, your assignment is a tweeted photo of Stephen Holder with Pluto.
All right, fair enough. Listen, I am a company man. Let me tell you, I am a faithful Disney employee. So, as a matter of fact, I want to retract a statement I made just now. I actually am super excited to go to Disney, and I hope the lines are so long.
I forgot you're an employee. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
so that is good. I mean, do you know what it costs?
Just enjoy it before Ron DeSantis kicks him out of the state. That was apparently. I don't know if that's on hold or what happened there. Right.
Exactly. And also, I will say, do you know what it costs to go to Disney these days? So
yes, I do.
Yeah, it's like, do you get like discounted? Did you say as an employee?
Oh, buddy, I've got an entrance card with my name on it, so I don't pay a dime. The best part of it.
That is beautiful.
And you're every member of your family gets one. Beautiful. Best benefit in the company. Seriously.
I think I just became related to Stephen Holder.
Same.
Right.
Both of us, actually.
Listen, I've only been to Disney once. It was pre-Epcot, if you can believe that. And I've told the story a million times, but I waited in line for like 2 hours to meet Mickey Mouse. And my sister and I were on deck, and then they came, and it was time for Mickey to go, have lunch with Minnie. And so my mom pushes us in, and I have a photo in my parents' photo album of my sister and I and two totally random kids that look completely befuddled standing with Mickey Mouse in between us. True story.
That is great.
Karen Query was not messing around. She's like, get in there. Okay. Yeah.
Listen, and that's why parents pay all that money to take their kids to Disney World.
You're
so
right.
They can go take a picture with some random kids. There you go.
We will look for the Pluto photo soon, all right?
All right, you got it.
All right, Stephen Holder from ESPN. By the way, speaking of Pluto, that made me think of like outer space stuff. Jimmy, are you fired up for the eclipse?
I am excited, Jake. You?
I think it's cool. Now, I got to thinking about this. Purdue is partnering with that deal at IMS. So this is a huge deal for Purdue and, just their whatever their science program, their astronomy program, whatever. And then I got to thinking about it, and it's on the day of the national championship game. Okay?
I did not put that together. Wow.
So if Purdue's playing in the national championship game, what that essentially means is if Purdue is to win the national championship and do so on the day of the once-in-a-lifetime lunar eclipse, then that would mean that Purdue's two proudest moments as a university of the last 100 years both involve the moon, right? That's my tweet that I'm going to send.
That's good. You got that in the drafts already, or you got to still type that up?
Speaking of drafts, I looked at a mock one for the NBA, and there's something that's going to surprise you next.
Listen to The Ride with JMV this week. Justin Moore and Randy Hauser with Austin Michael. That's going to be October 11th at the amphitheater at White River State Park. Probably be a beautiful evening, October 11th. We will do that coming up here in just a little bit. If you're just joining us, where have you been? We mentioned earlier that Khalil Ware appears to have announced on Instagram that he is departing Indiana University. One would presume that that means that he is leaving for the National Basketball Association. And that led me to start looking through some of the mock drafts, which, as we know, mock drafts more often than not are good for mocking. But I did find this interesting in looking through a mock draft, and I'm always happy to do it because that allows me to use my really bad David Stern impersonation. So this mock draft, the first that I unearthed in trying to find out exactly where Khalil Ware would be drafted, I found this gem. So go ahead and with the 14th pick in the 2024 NBA draft, the New Orleans Pelicans select Zach Edey from Purdue University. So I saw one mock draft that has Edey going into now the top 15, if you can believe that. That does admittedly feel aggressive, right? But I've heard, again, I've talked to a couple of people that have said in this draft, because it's a dry draft, that they think Edey could be moving up because, A, they feel like his offensive game might be more versatile than he's given credit, and B, he is a very safe pick, and that you know when you draft him, yes, you might not be getting somebody that's going to be, you know, like an all-star for you, but you could be getting a guy that is a super productive and solid player for you for a number of years, and that could improve his draft stock. But then also in the exact same mock draft I was looking at, we have,
man, I can't wait for this sound next month.
With the 19th pick in the 2024 NBA draft, the New York Knicks select Khalil Ware from the University of Indiana. So there you go. That's
attaboy, Paul Corsaro.
What's that?
Got a guy from the
yeah,
University of Indiana.
He was staying true to his Stern. I respect that. That was a deep cut.
That is a deep cut. That is my run. And before people send me the tweet, that is the long-running David Stern joke that I use.
I don't want to necessarily out the site that you went to, because even though it is a day of mocking when looking at mock drafts, both those would surprise me. I have seen Zach Edey as low as 42 to 33.
Right.
And I've seen Ware as high as 11. So the idea of, if I heard you right, Edey would have been selected ahead of Ware in that scenario, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
That would surprise me a great deal.
Jonathan Givony, he does stuff for ESPN. He's like their Mel Kiper is the best way to put it for NBA for ESPN. His latest mock draft that just released, I think like 2 days ago, he had Khalil Ware going 25th. So he had him as a late first rounder.
I think that, listen, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. And talking to a handful of people is not the end-all be-all. Khalil Ware, when he was coming out of high school, was a consensus top 5 level high school player and a 5-star recruit when he went to Oregon. Dana Altman's a very well-respected coach who has sent a lot of players to the NBA. And Dana Altman essentially, when Khalil Ware left Oregon, was very vociferous of Khalil Ware's lack of motor. And that Dana Altman himself said, I couldn't awaken it in him. He didn't have any drive. He shopped himself around. He took the NIL money to end up in Indiana. He took NIL money just to visit Indiana and then took NIL money to get to Indiana. And in Khalil Ware's defense, number one, that's absolutely his monetary right. But number two, at a time when he got hurt at Indiana, and I can't remember if it was ankle or what the injury was, there was discussion that he was going to shut it down because I think his reputation was preceding him there, that like he was just looking for the payout and the move on. He came back from injury, and I thought in the last quarter of the season, Khalil Ware was as consistent and as hard playing a performer that Indiana had. His game against Wisconsin was outstanding. He showed great movement around the basket. He was a very good rebounder, and he actually, to me, showed a drive that had previously eluded him. But his reputation is still there to the point where I talked to a couple of people that said there's no questioning his talent. It's never been about talent with him, but the thing that's going to hold him back a little bit is the reputation. Now, Edey, on the other hand, is a guy that because he had no reputation when he got to college and was basically a project that got, I mean, you could see the gears grinding through his head as he got the ball on the low post in his early games at Purdue. And now he's got to the point where he can shoot the ball. He's not been asked to shoot the ball, nor should he at Purdue.
Sure. Again, that whole thing is a big, like, I don't want to, Purdue's going on a great one. I don't want to undercut Zach Edey at the end of the show, but, like, I'm a doubting Thomas of it depends what you're asking him to do. 1-3 a game? Okay. If you're asking 4, I need to see it before I'm going to say, oh, yeah, that's what he is.
I think the thought process is this, okay, with Zach Edey. So what I'm getting at with Khalil Ware, by the way, is that Ware's reputation is the thing that might hurt him from going like 10 to 15. Nobody questions the talent, though. Edey, on the other hand, I think is moving his way up a little bit because people look at Edey and they say, this is a guy that if we draft him in a dry draft, we can take a guy 15 to 17 that may well be somebody that just flames out in a year or two and is out of the league. Or we can take a Zach Edey that might not ever start in an all-star game, but is going to be a good, solid rotational piece for us for 8 to 10 years. And anything above that is gravy. And there is a bird-in-the-hand level thought with Zach Edey that is helping him move up the draft. Now, the other aspect of it is this. The one guy from yesteryear of big men that could perhaps translate as much to today as anybody, quite frankly, is Rick Smits. And that sounds crazy because he wasn't fleet of foot, but he had great footwork around the basket and had an ability to get himself shots from the 8, 10, 12-foot range. I don't think anybody is expecting Zach Edey to come down and be Kevin Durant. What they like is if they can see that he can hit the 8 to 10, 12-foot jump shot, then that would parlay into more minutes. The only knock would be, Jimmy, with Zach Edey is the fast pace in which today's NBA game is played, how many sets is he going to miss because you're waiting for him to come down the floor and get into the half-court set? That is the one thing that I think is a knock on him. But I think that teams are intrigued by the vast improvement that he has been able to make at Purdue, and then a little bit invigorated by what happens if even at a percentage of that improvement at the NBA level he is able to transform himself. Because he has two things you can't teach. Incredible size, number one, and a knack for the basketball, number two.
Look, there's no shame if this ends up happening, which is what I think is going to happen. But he is more likely to be the long list of players that were great college players that never had the long, fruitful NBA career, that were never the same starter, high-level player, to your point, Jake, NBA All-Star at the next level. That said, he could very well have a nice, long NBA career. When I look at him, especially due to the lack of quickness and mobility of his game, and you look at the fast-paced nature of the NBA, I think best case for him, he is maybe a Jalen Smith light, maybe not stretch the floor in that way, but could be a second-unit guy that's getting 10 to 14 minutes a night. And the lowest for him, I think, is he's like Luka Garza, and he's dominating in the G League for 30 and 7 on any given Tuesday.
See,
I don't see starting level ability for him in the NBA. I think he could be a nice rotation piece, but that's like a 6 to 12 minute a game type thing.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is I think there are teams. Who's the kid that, and I'm kind of digging deep here, I realize. Who was the guy a handful of years ago that the Pacers took in the second round out of Duke that was uber athletic? And he was going to be like a dunk champion. They ended up trading him after a year. I say 5 or 6 years ago, watch, with my old brain, it's probably 12. But hold on. I'm looking it up right now. Somebody help me out and send me a text or a tweet. But what I'm saying is you could take a guy like
Cassius Stanley.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so you can draft at 18. You can draft a Cassius Stanley, and in this year's draft 18 pick 18 is last year's pick 36. That's what I'm getting at, right? So you could draft a Cassius Stanley and say, hey, this guy's uber athletic. Let's see if it works out for us. And then after a year or two, you're moving on from it. Or they could say, a team could say, we're going to draft Zach Edey because at the very least, we have a Mason Plumlee's pretty athletic. I'm not just saying that because he's a white guy. Like, who's just a big
Andre Drummond.
There you go. That's a perfect example. Or who's the big guy that Miami had a couple of years ago that was a journeyman center? And he gave him
Hassan Whiteside?
No, less significant than that. But my point being, to Jimmy's point, a 10 to 12, 15-minute per night guy that gives you some fouls, rebounds, and a handful of points, and on occasion, if he starts, is a good player. I think that's selling Edey almost short. But if you know you're going to get that for 7 to 9 years, it's not terrible. That's my point. I personally, Jimmy, do see more out of him. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I am a bigger believer in his NBA role than what you're stating.
I think that I agree with your evaluation of him, but that to me is even in this year's draft is a very late first, second round type of draft selection. Certainly not in the top 20.
In most years.
I don't know even this year if it's good enough to warrant putting him in the top 20 of an NBA draft.
I think people that their job relies on making those picks would say that's not the case. Dwayne Dedmon's who I'm thinking of. Not a household name, right?
Sure.
But just you know what I mean? A guy that comes in and gives you Bismack Biyombo, who's the greatest player in NBA history.
But again, those are all. I mean, Biyombo especially can move. Like he can move faster.
I think Edey can move.
And look, if he shows that and he shows that he has a little bit of a jumper, then yes, I'll look like egg on my face and people will be wrong. But until I see that, I get it. He's not going to do it at Purdue because why would he do it at Purdue? No one can stop him down low. But yeah, if he has that to his game, by all means, he's going to have success in the NBA. We just haven't seen it yet other than, oh, man, did you see how he looked at the combine last year? He's got a jumper. He can do it. Well, again, maybe I'm being the doubting Thomas here, but I need to see it before I'm willing to risk a top 20 pick on him.
He banked in a 3 against Indiana.
You're right. Yeah, there it is.
I'm going to say this one more time. Today's, in 2024, picks 18 to 20, okay, are 2023 and 2025 picks 38 to 40. So when you're saying he's not a top 20 pick, what I'm saying to you is you might be right. But if you're saying he is typically pick 38 to 40, in 2024, that's pick 18 to 20. That's my point, right? Like this year, there are enough.
I get the point. I disagree with it because of his.
You want to know why Tiger King is considered a great show?
I mean, sure, yes.
Tiger King is considered a great show because it got launched on an online streaming platform right at the exact week that the entire world was shutting down and people couldn't go anywhere and were looking for something to deviate their attention. It was the perfect storm for Tiger King. This is the perfect storm in a draft year for Zach Edey. I don't disagree with your comments about, in totality, about his style of play. But I'm saying this year is the perfect storm for him to go into the draft and be in that 15 to 20 range for that reason, because it is literally, this particular draft is totally void of depth. So when you're going to get to a spot and you are drafting 18, 19, 20, and you're a team that probably has a roster that's pretty set, and you're like, we just need rotational depth at this point, that's where he's going to slot. That's what's going to do well for him. Did we figure out how we're giving the tickets away, Eddie?
No.
Do you want to figure that out?
Sure.
How about I just say caller number 3? How's that?
That
Justin
works.
Moore and Randy Hauser, special guest Austin Michael. That's going to be Friday, October 11th.
Is it really a special guest if they're announcing who the special guest is?
Yeah, because it's special. He's not with them every night. Austin's not, and he's got 2 first names, right? How many guys you know with 2 first names?
That's very true.
So that makes him special. Friday, October 11th at Everwise Amphitheater at White River State Park. Basically what that means is the newly renovated and very cool place right across from Victory Field. And it's going to be Friday, October 11th, so the weather is going to be nice. It's going to be a Friday night. It's going to be gorgeous outside. You're going to have high school football, and you're going to say, you know what, instead we're going to the concert because I won tickets. How did you win them? I won them on Aquarium Company. When did you win them? I won them back in March, 8 months ago. That's correct. How'd you do it? Because I was caller number 2 on the program. So caller number 2, you're on your way. JMV is just walked in, and we'll catch up with them next.
Luxair the intelligent way to keep your home.
This is my way. This is how I win.
Today's plays of the day, all in the NBA. We will take the Golden State Warriors to win outright on the money line over the Miami Heat. That game in Miami. We'll also take the New Orleans Pelicans to win the money line. Basically a pick 'em there as they host the Oklahoma City Thunder. And one other note, a shout out to Indy's own Michael Grady. You know him as the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's getting the call up to TNT tonight. He'll be on the call for the Mavericks and Kings. All the best to MG. Any bets for you, Eddie?
I do. I've got 2 bets. I'm taking Luka Doncic under 32.5 points against the Sacramento Kings tonight, and I'll take Chet Holmgren for the Oklahoma City Thunder over 15.5 points.
I'll take that dude from the Raptors to not shoot any threes.
It's his eye. You got to get out of here. Got an eye issue.
Vision problem. John, Indiana State tonight. Big one, right?
Indiana State could be the final time I see some dudes. Like the coach, a couple players.
They're going to win. They're going to win.
Yeah.
They're going to win.
Yeah, and shout out to Bob Valvano, too. Way to make things very convenient for Josh, for Dusty May. Great job down there, former coach. Think you'd know better, maybe, than to – I'll get back to that a little bit later.
Say that there were some death threats. Is that what he said? Dusty, that's what he said, right?
On the air, yeah. Yeah. On the and it was, I think it was tongue in cheek, and certainly it was stuff that was shared off the record. And that's what happens. That's how you gain trust, right? If you're us, is get off the record stuff and put it on the record.
Just think if people had our off-air conversations.
Can you imagine? I'd be in. You know how many things I'd be in jail for right now?
Have you watched, by the way, the Nickelodeon documentary?
I watched a little bit of it. I remember when Dan Snyder was on Head of the Class, and I thought he was probably a little sketchy in that. Remember Dan Snyder? He's behind all that. He's that big fat guy
Snyder,
Head of the Class.
Is it Snyder?
No, Snyder's Pat Harrington on One Day at a Time. He was the janitor. The building super.
I know, but his name's Dan Schneider, isn't it?
Is it Snyder? Did I say Dan Snyder?
It's not Daniel Snyder from the Commanders.
No,
but yes,
no,
I mean,
Dan Schneider. Yeah,
but either way, yes, he's like
actor.
It is one of those things.
Yeah.
I interned at Viacom, which is MTV, VH1, and Nickelodeon, and I will say, like, Nickelodeon was its own floor. I was not up there, and it was kind of before all of those shows were out and about.
You said Mark Summers hanging out with you, a couple of NC guys right there.
That's right. The people at Nickelodeon were odd. I will say that they were just odd.
Before Mark Summers got in on Burt Reynolds on that episode of The Tonight Show. It goes down in history as something classic right there. Remember, Burt threw his drink on him or something, didn't he?
That's right. That is correct.
That may be the greatest. You've had a lot of great things at North Central. That may be it right there.
That is correct. John's up next. He'll carry you home. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Ride with JMV.
Bobby Riddell joins us as Purdue